The ombudsman. The ombudsman, push on him. Roll call, it looks like a war room. Now let's see, Angvit, Chai. Yeah. Fisher, Troney, Holmes.
Here.
Josephson. Here. Parker. Parsons. Here. Reed, Sheffield, Sturgiluski.
Oh, there.
We have the minutes you've been distributed to you, I think. I have it. The minutes of the meeting of regular meeting of June 18th, which will be up for approval next week.
Pat doesn't collect them.
And, yeah, and minutes of the. Let's see.
That's all she had,
Uh,
was a revised version of those minutes, and then she'll have the others prepared for next Thursday, a week from now.
The other minutes will be out a week from now.
Get the drinks here for Pops.
Come on in, Dan.
I didn't have any left, so I drove it out for a while. I'm sorry about that.
We're just barely starting.
There were no appearance requests. Unfinished business, none, save that of the Charter Production Committee and Public Information Committee. So, call Mr. Josephson.
Mr.
Charter
Chairman,
Production.
there are guests here, Mr. Nelson and Mr. Levesque, and we thought that the commission might want to hear from them on financial matters, and in the interest of their time, we're going to start with Article 10, and then they can be excused, and we can back up to some of the holdover matters from last week in the first 9 articles. In the packet, you will find some redundant materials. I think there's a 1.5-page report which kind of outlines the results of the Charter Production Committee meeting today on Article 10. In this report, many issues are only, in a sense, certified to the Commission as requiring policy decisions from the Commission and guidance from the consultants who are here with us tonight. In other cases, the Commission has made specific recommendations. Then Mr. Garnett has followed through on his instructions on the last Commission meeting with respect to cleanup matters in the first 9 articles. And then he has also prepared some amendments which were based upon the discussions of the Production Committee as to Article 10. Perhaps if you'd like, we can go through the Article 10 paragraph by paragraph.
Let's go through that.
Mr. Chairman, in Article 10, Section 1001, the committee has recommended deletion of the first 2 sentences. These specify a fiscal year. It's our feeling that these are more properly matters of transition. We expect that similar language would be included in the transition article, but not as a permanent ongoing requirement for fixed fiscal years in the charter document itself. And Mr. Garnett has prepared for you a paragraph showing how Section 10.1 would read. The capitalized materials in parentheses would be deleted, the underlined materials added, of course. The fiscal year of the school district is now set by state law. The charter language prepared by Mr. Garnett would allow the Assembly, if state law should permit in the future, to change the fiscal year of the school district. Mr. Chairman, I would move for adoption of the committee report on paragraph 10.1.
Second. Been moved and second, adoption of the new report on Section 1001.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if a matter of form, if on each one, we might allow an opportunity for both Norm and Bob to make comment if they so wish.
I think would be good. We've asked them to be here to go with us on some of these questions. And if they do have any comments, I'd appreciate hearing. I'm sure the commission would. Lisa?
Is the fiscal year to read the assembly by ordinance may change the fiscal year of the municipality and may not take effect until at least 1 year after enactment? Is that to be the whole section on fiscal year?
Do you have
That includes the underlying material.
I don't know.
in your
Right,
packet?
right,
I don't know.
right under the report of.
I have this.
Back material for the month. Then back in the back of that. Back of it. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion from the commission members?
Could we hear if there's any comments on the...
Bob?
This is a new change to me. I wasn't aware of it being deleted. From my own personal standpoint, and from the fiscal control standpoint, I would prefer that a date be established, and then if the assembly after it is operating would like to change the date, and it would give us more of something to shoot for.
Mr. Chairman, Bob, I think the idea, as it would be expressed here, is that the initial fiscal years of the municipality and the school district would be specified in the transition provisions, and they would persist until
That's what I was looking for here, and I didn't
No,
see it.
well, we just haven't gotten to the transition.
Well, that is the intention.
Yes.
They
To
would-
move it from this section to the
To the
transition.
transition.
Does that make it right from your point of view? Or I can see why you don't want to be left without any fiscal.
Somewhere there should be a definite date, I think, for the new assembly to work on.
It would be in the transition.
Norm, do you have anything?
Well, I think that
Have you?
it shows here some concern as to what a capital budget is from a capital program. I think it's a very simple matter.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh,
Section by section.
So we just deal with 1001.
We're just on 1001.
I got no problem with that.
We'll go through them paragraph by paragraph, if that's agreeable, so that
Fine.
Question.
Question has been called. All
Can you
those,
restate it?
but
I'm confused.
Um,
I'm not sure everyone has before them this particular ordinance.
you have to, next right under,
In the packet?
next right under the
Mr. Chairman,
charter.
will there be a provision, however, in the charter that states that how the fiscal year can be changed, or will it be just left in the open?
If he left in the open, the fiscal year will be set, and the way I read this, the assembly by ordinance may change the fiscal year.
That will remain in there.
That would be the addition.
By ordinance, we get into it.
Mr. Chairman, my one question is there any problem with the assembly changing the fiscal year of the school district? Is that the proper body to change the school district's
No, there's a
fiscal
problem
year?
there, specifically because of the state, until that's changed.
And that's to the extent.
I think Mrs. Holmes' question is, assuming that the legislature allowed the assembly to do so, would there be a problem in assembly having the opportunity to change the fiscal year? That would not be changed.
Norm, on the 5th page of the packet is the wording as it would show.
I don't understand, it says 1001, is that
the portion that's underlined?
The capitalized portion would be moved to the transition section, and the part that is underlined is an addition, and the part that's not underlined or capitalized is presently there.
Ms. Parker?
A question, Mr. Joseph, on this. Why don't we want to make mention of what the fiscal year is to be in this section?
Because it's not charter matter for the body of the charter that there's a fiscal year running from 1 January for the municipality and a fiscal year running for the school district from July 1. Those are transitional matters, but subject to legislative change either at the state or federal state level in the case of the school board, or both in the case of...
So if they're not matters to the charter, then why do we say that the change can't take effect until 1 year after it's been enacted?
I think that has to do, maybe our consultants could answer that better, but I assume that's because of just the orderliness of budgeting and clarity of the procedure.
The new legislative body would be able to figure that out, I would assume, or hope.
Well,
I can't hear you, Lisa.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to mention that if they decided that fiscal year January to December, and they decided to change the fiscal year to September, I think it would cause some major problems. You have to have a certain amount of reasonable time to effect a change. It's a major change.
I would hope to have enough sight to see that.
Can't hear you, Lisa.
I was muttering.
Mr. Chairman, question?
Question is called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, the section 1001 has been passed as amended. Joseph?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Section 1002 raises several issues. There is a draft revision submitted by Mr. Garnett, which I'll ask that he speak to. This was done, I think, after he heard the committee discussion, but isn't really part of the committee report. But the issues that we identified have to do with, at least with these. First, whether the mayor, when or before he submits the 6-year program to the Assembly, should make that program available to the Planning and Zoning Commission as a requirement of the charter. There is a view that should be done before the mayor sends the program to the Assembly so that the Commission can have input to the mayor for that purpose. There's also a question as to whether the 6-year reference is simply an arbitrary one that is more historical than logical, and whether we should either change the 6-year period or eliminate the reference and let that be done as the administrators and the Assembly want it to be done. I think that these are the major issues that we picked up. I think maybe the gentleman want to speak to those.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if we might hear Mr. Rick's comments regarding the deletion prior to...
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, by way of preface, I feel that we discussed at some length this whole question of the 6-year plan, its relation to the budget, the timing. We did a certain amount of analysis, time frame. I think subcommittee worried the subject a good deal. I don't feel that conclusions were really, firm conclusions to exactly how that should be handled were reached. What this language represents, both in 1002 and back in 907, where the school district's 6-year plan is dealt with, it really just represents for discussion an attempt by me to simplify it, if we can, and to make some of the dates consistent with each other.
There was one other question that I think came up. If you read 907 and 1002 together, it's not clear that when the mayor sends to the assembly a 6-year program, including the school district under the first draft charter language, that school district program is the same program that he gets under 907 from the superintendent of schools. And I don't know what our intent was in the first draft, but it's susceptible of the interpretation that perhaps he can revise it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Mr. Beck a question. I have the feeling that it would be possible for the school district, even though we're proposing they start off with 2 different fiscal years from the different fiscal year from the municipality, for them to turn in their capital improvement program in the fall along with the municipality's capital improvement program, and that they could meet the same timetable on the capital improvement program, though they can't on the operating budget. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chairman, it does, and there's no problem. A 6-year plan is just that, a plan. But I think personally that this provision, if it could be brought in with the school district, is probably one of the better financial provisions in the whole charter. And I hate to see it mangled. I feel that for the first time we provide a view, not historical, but a view to the future as to what we were facing. So, in my personal opinion, I would oppose any type of changes that would,
Delete it.
sort of not delete it, but just bring it to a point of dilution.
In other words, you think we ought to look ahead as many years as we reasonably can? Do you think that 6 years is a reasonable time, or should we say 5 years, or should we say...
5 years or 6 years, no problem.
Chairman, Mr. Parsons, the logic of the 5 was mentioned this afternoon in that this is the age at which most children start some kind of school. Schools need that much ahead of the plan, and they have those statistics available if there isn't a great deal of influx in the alcohol population.
Mr. Chairman, 2 questions if I might. One, which is the more standard thing that we're seeing now, the 5 or the 6 year? Normally the 6 year includes 1 year really operating budget, so you are in effect talking about a 5-year plan. Which is most standard and you think most desirable? Both of you will comment. Bob?
Mr. Chairman, I think the way you explain it is probably the most prevalent this time. You're talking 6 years, but 1 is really the next operating.
So you feel that's a very logical approach?
Yes, and if I may continue on his comments, as I explained to Mr. Barnett yesterday, I support this type of thing completely, a plan. But the very fact that we here are now trying to determine whether it should be 5 years or 6 years or 4 years or 7 years or whatever it is, it seemed to me that is this something that really needs to be put into a charter, that if the Assembly decides to change it somewhere down the line, they have to go back to the voters and say, instead of 6, we want 3 or we want 8. I think it's extremely important that we have provisions in here for when the budgets should be submitted and approved and the public hearings and this sort of thing. But I look at the 6-year plan as favorable as it is, and I'm certainly support it. I'm wondering if this wouldn't better be an ordinance by the Assembly rather than having to go back to the voters each time you may want to change this plan.
Well, why not, what would be the possibility of just dropping out the year and call for the program to definitely call for one, but not to set the time? It seems to me that's the only thing, perhaps, that's open to debate.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps something along those lines that requires such a plan, but leaves the term of this plan open to the Assembly as to what their wishes might be. I'm just thinking of flexibility here in future years. In many of these provisions, we leave the actual detail up to the new Assembly. For instance, in the purchasing section, we say they shall provide for purchasing regulations, period, which is very brief. And I would think this is another item that, in line with the budgeting and accounting and other matters, could best be determined and should be flexible enough that it can be changed if somewhere down the line we decide we want it different.
Well, Mr. Chairman, in that regard, is the matter assisted somewhat by the fact that in the 6-year plan, if there were such a thing, the detail, the specificity would diminish as you look to the end of the period?
Oh, definitely.
And would that
Yes, this is any plan changes, whether it's 6 years or 4 years. That's true. And this is not a major point with me. I'm merely expressing the opinion that we're talking about some very tight limitations here that really are not that essential.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask both gentlemen if we said at least a 3-year plan, is that a minimum? Or at least a 3-year, ideally a 5 to 7 year plan or a 5 or more year plan?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I know that for a fact there are many charters throughout the country that call for a specific amount of years, such as this quoted here. If it's good enough for them, I don't know why it isn't good enough for us. It works.
Your feeling then is you'd like to see him?
I like to see something definite, you're always on limbo, waiting for...
How long did it take to get the borough to get one?
Ms. Parker?
What's the coordination between the 6-year program and the comprehensive plan?
What's the coordination?
Yeah.
If we had a good 6-year program, it would have a direct effect on the comprehensive plan.
Would carry out the comprehensive plan.
But that is not in effect now, so we're more or less grasping and trying to develop a comprehensive plan without the data of what we might have as a result of the 6-year program.
Is there a way to coordinate the two together?
Yes, I think that's the reason that there was statements made to have the mayor submit it to the planning commission prior to bringing it to the assembly.
Well,
Mr. Josephson?
could I get some guidance on the matter of the reference in 1002, the phrase including the school district, which is deletable in Mr. Garnett's draft? I'm not sure, Rick, what was intended here. It ties into 907, in which the superintendent must submit a 6-year program.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Joe, what I did for discussion, and really I say in writing this I was trying to respond to what I thought were the sources of confusion. I separated the school district's 6-year plan from the assembly's 6-year plan, and I tied the budget of the school district to the school district's 6-year plan and the budget of the assembly to the assembly's 6-year plan. Part of the reason for this is the statute says that the school district submits its budget to the assembly 90 days before the end of their fiscal year, which is April 1.
To the assembly or the mayor?
To the assembly. And we had questions about whether, under those circumstances, the school board should be submitting its 6-year plan through the mayor, or whether, in the same manner as it submits its budget directly to the assembly, it should submit its 6-year plan directly to the assembly. For sake of argument, that's the way this is set up. That's why the reference to the school district in the submission of the mayor to the assembly is deleted.
Is there a question here on Title 29 on that?
Yeah, well, that's right, Norm. That's where in Title 29 and Title 14 the relation between school districts and boroughs are set out. One of them does speak to the submission of the budget directly.
To the mayor,
To
is it
the
not?
assembly.
Or to the assembly?
We need to make that clear in that.
And I don't know if you want to...
It's right before us.
Mr. Chairman, there's one problem. If we leave this, if we would leave out including the school district, one problem we've had is really getting it before the assembly and coordinating it with the borough capital improvement program. I'm looking at the new government now, and I wonder if it's enough that they have, say, the capital improvement program for the school district more or less standing next to the one for the new municipality, or if we need to write into this that there has to be a bringing together. It may be that that's not possible or is too detailed to spell out.
Mr. Chairman, I think that was the intent here, but we mentioned.
Yeah, well, it really was the intent here, and we're
Well, that's
changing
right,
that
but we
intent.
separated it back out, and that's what this language would do. Mr. Chairman, I certainly it can be written back in. I think we could require that the school board send its 6-year plan to the assembly through the mayor, so that in some sense the mayor would be integrating the plans. On the other hand, we do provide that the assembly and the school board must sit down and talk to each other 4 times a year, and possibly that sort of coordination could occur.
So let me try a motion on the side just for discussion purposes.
I would move to adopt,
To adopt the following amendments to 1002. After the word submit, the mayor shall submit, insert, comma, after consultation with the Planning and Zoning Commission, comma, and to delete the phrase including the school district at the end of the first sentence.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to,
Is there a second to this?
Mary
I
Connery.
seconded it.
to change by substitution, where you say after consultation with the planning commission, I would say after, or words to the effect, after receiving the planning commission recommendation. I mean, is that, when I say consultation, I see a different thing than the commission actually making a recommendation, which I think they should do. Is that, if that's the intent of yours, then I won't.
Yeah, that's, if you want to say after recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Then with your reading of that, you're amending the amendment.
Yeah,
I accept the amendment to the amendment.
Well, fine.
Your second?
I agree.
All right. Now, how would you have it read? After certain consultation with planning and zoning?
No.
After, I guess, after recommendation.
Or with recommendation, with planning commission
All right.
recommendation.
The mayor shall submit with recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
With recommendations?
Shall submit to the assembly with
That's right.
the recommendations of.
The Planning and Zoning Commission.
With recommendations from the planning?
And zoning.
And as far as the deletion is concerned, Mr. Garnett, of the school district reference, Mr. Garnett's work on 907 after our meeting last Thursday makes it clear that the budget and program are submitted to the assembly by the school board. And therefore, the reference in 1002 that the mayor also submits the school district program is confusing.
Unnecessary.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Froning?
I think we should make up our minds as to whether we want the capital improvements budget from the school district to be included in the other, rather than going in at the same time as it does with the operating budget. And this was
Let me go back.
the real question I
Mary.
think we need to decide.
At the moment, we have an amendment, and if I'd like to speak to the amendment, and then if there's a question called, we'll...
Perhaps someone wants the question divided into two.
Is the amendment on the original, or is it on the one that
No, no.
was submitted?
No, the original.
Shall submit to the assembly with recommendation from the planning and zoning commission.
Call for a division of the question.
Yes.
Move us along.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So, now, how would you divide the question? With recommendation from the planning
Right.
commission?
Question.
That's done.
And the question has been called for. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, so ordered. And with recommendation from the zoning commission. Right?
Planning and zoning commission, yeah,
We've
that
done,
just passed.
We
we've
just
achieved that.
Yeah, we just passed that.
Now, the second part has to do with striking the phrase including the school district after the word municipality.
And, Mr. Chairman, I think that we need to make a policy decision there. Norma's told us that it is not impossible for us to do that and get them together. And as I understood Arliss, it's desirable to get them together. I feel it's desirable to have the whole picture together when it comes to the assembly on the capital improvements program. Well, Mr. Chairman,
Arliss?
Seems to me that it would be appropriate in 907 to change when we require the school district to submit it. I think the question really is whether we want the mayor or someone to bring together the capital improvement programs of the other two. And I really think in a way that's going a step too far, that could be, they may have to be done side by side. I would propose perhaps at the appropriate time in 907 to call for planning commission review of the school capital improvements program and attempting to rewrite it so that we would have it on the same
Are you saying approval, pardon me? Are you saying?
recommendation, I'm sorry. Recommendation of the planning commission also to have it come in synchronization with the new municipalities capital improvement program.
this is what I'm looking
Well,
for.
but put that back in 907 where it belongs.
All right.
And drop it out of here. I'll support the amendment for deletion.
Mr. Chairman,
Holmes?
did we have discussion as to why Rick was proposing deletion of the last sentence? Did I miss that discussion?
No, Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Rick?
there was no discussion on that. I, in my dauntless effort to eliminate useless words, figured that these fell in that category, and for the sake of argument, I bold-faced them.
That was pretty
Boldly.
bold.
Perhaps we could get some comments from our two finance experts as to
Should we go
the
back?
effect of deleting that. Well,
Or do you think this ties together, the deletion?
if
Just do whatever
The amendment to strike the phrase, strike including the school district. Question been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? No, the commissioners are not voting. Have to go to roll call vote, we will, but I'd like to hear you speak up. I'm a little bit.
Would you like to run that by again, Mr. Chairman?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered.
It's more like it.
Proceed to discussion Terry brought up on the last sentence regarding the program shall include estimates of the effect of capital improvement projects on maintenance, operation, and personnel costs being deleted.
Madam, Mr. Chairman, I very much want to see that in because this is something that is not always readily apparent, and there's nobody better than the staff to give us the implications.
Mr. Chairman, I was wondering if the charter, its wisdom knew exactly what this all brought into focus just by this sentence. What it states really is that if you're going to have capital improvements and you're going to spend $50 million or $40 million or whatever have you, that you're not just going to look at the capital. You're going to look at the total picture, how many people you're going to need to operate it, how much the maintenance is going to be. So you see a total picture, and that's what it is.
so, you would recommend leaving it in.
That's what I think. Mr. Arliss?
No, I'd like to see us move on. I think it's, that's wordage that's of value.
This was a suggestion, and there's no motion to delete. We'll go on.
Chairman, the committee comment on 1003 just kind of points up an alarm that we may be using terms of art here, operating budget, capital budget, without understanding exactly what we're talking about, which is another reason why we wanted to have some experts with us tonight. There was also a question raised by Mrs. Froney about the implication in 1003 that the operating and capital budget would come in together, that perhaps if the capital budget preceded the operating budget, the Assembly would get a better view. Then Mr. Garnett has proposed in his draft adding the phrase for the next fiscal year after the words capital budget, I think for clarity, and striking, he's raising it as a policy question, striking the last sentence, the mayor shall submit with the budget an analysis of fiscal implications of all tax levies and programs. And you may want to speak to that.
Joe, Mr. Chairman, that's really in the same spirit as the 1002 suggestion. I'm not really clear what a mayor will think or how he will respond when he takes this directive, what it will actually need him to do. And then, under the circumstances, I thought the question should be faced whether that was really useful language or not.
Did you want to speak to for the next fiscal year matter?
Yeah, that was not intended to change the meaning, Mr. Chairman. Let me see where I am. I just want to clarify that is in fact the budget that we're talking about.
What was operating capital budget? Lisa?
I would move for the adoption of 1003 as proposed by Rick.
It's been moved for the adoption of 1003 as proposed by Rick.
Point of clarification, that includes Lisa deleting the last sentence?
Yes.
Is there a second to Lisa's motion? Hearing no second.
Mr. Chairman?
Motion died.
I would move to adopt 1003 as it was in the first draft with the additional phrase for the next fiscal year.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adopt 1003 as it was in the first draft with the addition of for the next fiscal year as underscored in Rick's proposal.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear from our consultants, our paid consultants tonight. Could you, we really want to get you to point out any entanglements or technical problems if there are any. Do you see anything?
I have a specific question, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Very
My intent wasn't that the capital budget and the operating budget shouldn't necessarily be considered together, but that the capital budget should come in ahead of it so that it would get separate consideration. You might take action on both of them at the same time. And this...
I think I can clarify.
Was he going that way?
Mm-hmm.
I do that, and I see this horde of elephants coming.
I think I can clarify some points on capital program and capital budget. You may have such a space here, which is good, is 6-year program. A 6-year program is not a budget. And in the capital area or operations area, we brought them in together. What would become the budget is the 1 year that affects you that you will approve. Say a 6-year budget, a 6-year program, you would adopt 1 year, which includes both operation, maintenance, and capital, and the remainder would be a planning program that you would continue on the following year.
I guess I'm still not quite clear, Norm. I do understand that we have to adopt this coming year's capital budget along with the operating budget. But I am sort of proposing that the capital part of the budget for the coming year be presented along with the 6-year program previous to the due date for the operating budget. Though action on the capital budget would only take place along with the operating budget. In other words, so that you have a preview of the 6 years, including this year's capital budget, before you go into your study for operating budget and your this coming year's
Mary,
budget.
excuse me, but I think that covered, I would believe so anyway. The form and content of the budget shall be consistent with the proposed 6-year program. If the form and content of the budget is consistent with it, then it has to have been proposed ahead.
Have we got our due date for the 6-year program ahead of our due date for the capital and operating budget? This is what I'm asking.
No.
Have we? Where's our schedule line here?
Well,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's rather clearly said up above that it was 90 days, and this also in operating and capital budget says 90 days. But I can't see there would be any reason why you could not have your capital budget earlier, and I think that is really getting terribly specific if we write that in. And if the operating budget is to carry out this capital improvements program, I think that's a responsibility of the Assembly to say, hey, we've got to see that that's to us a bit earlier. I think that's going too far to write those kind of dates in there. And I think you'd particularly have a problem if you wanted to say force the school district into it, because they have to work on population figures that they get as of September 1st. You know.
I don't think it's helpful or not.
I think Bob Nelson had a comment. Right.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to add that I see no problem with the official dates on this. As from a practical standpoint, we prepare our capital improvement budget to coincide with the upcoming elections for bonds.
Sure.
Consequently, even though we're not required to bring in our budget until, say, October, we are actually completing our capital improvement budgets now so that the October election, we will know, actually, by the 1st of September, we have to know how many bonds we're going to put on the ballot. So even though there's no legal requirement, we still do this. And I think the same thing would probably happen here.
Do you agree with that?
There's no restriction that you can't bring it into. And there is no approval. The budget isn't approved. It's merely work sessions and agreement.
Just put it on the floor.
Just 2 words in here that says at least 90 days
Okay,
allows.
that's fine. Let's go along with that.
Mr. Chairman? I do have one question, and I made a vow I was going to understand every word in this charter. And I don't understand when we say the mayor shall submit with the budget an analysis of the fiscal implications of all tax levies and programs.
1003 last sentence.
Last sentence.
That's the impact.
Well, when we talk about impact, normal budgeting procedure, you give a breakdown to departments, you give a scenario, you tell what's going to happen with those funds. Is that what we're talking about, or are we adding some new dimension that isn't commonly understood?
Well, is there an inference here too that if he does not have a program budget, he at least has a program narrative?
I read this as meaning that you can present a 6-year program, 5-year program, or what have you, but you're going to have revenues of methods of financing that program somehow, and this brings it right into focus, that those things have to be divulged. And if it's going to be, if the mill levy is going to go up 2 mil, if it's going to go down as a result of these programs, and based on estimates of what assessed valuation is going to do.
Is this something that we're not getting now? Is it adding a dimension? Is it?
No, I read this a little differently. First of all, I read this as only we're talking about next year's budget.
That's right.
We're not talking about the 6-year
We're
program.
talking about capital budget,
And,
for 1 year.
Operating and capital, and all I read in this that all we're saying is that we're presenting a budget, and we're also presenting the revenue requirements and the fiscal implications as to how we're going to fund that budget. And this is really no different than we're doing now, in my mind. We present a balanced budget. We indicate what the mill rate should be or what other revenue we might be bringing in to
That's what that last sentence means to you.
That's what it reads to me.
Norm, do you seriously disagree with that?
No, because we've always operated on, on balancing a budget. But I think here that it adds a little emphasis on the fact that the implications on revenues and programs will be a major part of the whole, program of budget, which I think is, there's nothing more important than fiscal affairs. That's one of the tasks.
It's in there.
There's a
Call for the question.
Question?
call for a question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Bill something?
Mr. Chairman, 1004 is not really a big deal, except that in the original draft, when we said that there would be at least one hearing 21 days after the budget is submitted and one hearing at least 7 days before the budget's adopted, it struck, I think, Mr. Holmes, that this could be the same hearing, that they could get by with just one hearing that would satisfy both of those tests. So the committee does recommend, as committee recommendation, the amendment prepared by Mr. Garnett at 1004 to add that one hearing will be at least 7, but not, one hearing will be at least 20 days after the budget is submitted.
It'd still be 21, Mr. Chairman. I don't know why that was changed.
Okay. And one hearing at least 7, but not more than 14 days prior to the adoption of the budget program. To clarify that there will at least be 2 occasions for public input.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Garnett?
I had another question, and this is sort of a policy thing. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to speak in terms of adopting the program in the same way that you adopt the budget. And therefore, I would, at least for discussion, put a bracket around the words "and program." We might have our consultants comment on that.
You would then eliminate the 2 words "and program."
Well, I just want to call attention to the implications, if any, of adopting the program in the same manner that you adopt the current year's or the next current year's budget.
Is the, Mr. Chairman, is the program adopted by ordinance in the same manner? Is it officially acted on? Should it be officially acted on?
I think it should be.
Yes.
I think this
I think it
provision
is
here
acted
good.
upon, Norm.
There's no public hearing.
Just received, Mary? Pardon me.
It's received.
There's no motion to adopt.
No, we received it.
The
We
city
officially
does.
received it.
They approve in principle.
Mr. Chairman,
Nelson?
of course, the city doesn't have to pass an ordinance for the budget to start with, but my own impression of this is that, and Norm brought this out earlier, that this 6-year program or 5-year program, whatever it is merely that. It's a planning program of what you think is going to happen. And I wouldn't want wording put in here to imply that they are approving this and that is it. It's in cement. You can't change it. And I don't know if that's, maybe I'm just reading that in here in this wording, that they're approving this. Or maybe I'm just being overly cautious here. But it should be separated in everybody's mind from the actual budget, which is a legal document for next year's spending. And the program is merely a plan that helps you prepare next year's budget in line with the subsequent years.
Mrs. Holmes?
Mr. Chairman, would it work if we said, and one hearing on the budget, at least 7 but not more than 14 days prior to adoption, to get it to the point where the first hearing is on both the budget and the program, but the second hearing, which is just prior to adoption of the budget, is just on the budget that is to be adopted? Because isn't that what we're concerned about, having them, before they officially adopt the budget, know what public thinks about the changes they're proposing in the budget.
Mr. Josephson?
Doesn't it make sense that the legislative body should be recorded on the 6-year plan? I mean, otherwise, the legislative body is only reacting to the administration in terms of the current year, and is doing nothing to kind of share in the general direction of the community. I think, Mr. Chairman, I mentioned approving or adopting a program does not necessarily mean you've adopted a budget and appropriated the funds there. Now, somewhere along the line here, to meet Mr. Josephson's statement that maybe there should be public input to a 6-year program rather than just work sessions.
Ms. Parker?
If the Assembly adopted the 6-year program, wouldn't they have to follow the policies set out in the 6-year program?
Well, I mean,
And if they moved away from it, would they amend it, or would they just bypass it?
I don't think it's bound in concrete in any case, because they would have the appropriation function, but at least gives the staff and I'm thinking out loud, but gives the staff and the executive some knowledge that the government is moving along a commonly approved track.
Isn't just receiving it doing the same thing, Joe?
Mr. Chairman, when we receive a report, oh, I'm sorry, Jane, excuse me.
Well, my feeling is that the public really isn't that aware of the capital improvements program, and that it would be beneficial to both the public and the municipality if, even by mentioning here that you had public hearings about it, that people started understanding that such a document exists and that it in fact, at least it suggests, establishes a policy that the government will be pursuing over a period of time. And they change, from year to year depending upon what major things have occurred. But I think it would be wise at this point to draw public attention to the fact that that document exists and require the Assembly to recognize that they're to act upon it.
I think, along with Bob Nelson, I think that we should pull out the 6-year program from this particular thing. I think we need to make that budget hearing on the budget very clean. We talked earlier in section 1003 about the operating and the capital budget for the next fiscal year. Now we talk about bringing back in the 6-year program. I don't think we're being consistent here.
Ms. Parker?
Do we have a motion on the floor?
There is no motion on the floor at the moment, I don't think.
Mr. Chairman.
There is. Is it? No.
I would move that we accept the language that Rick added, but not more than 14 days prior to the adoption of the budget, and that if we make reference to the 6-year program, that we make that reference in the part about the 6-year program.
In other words, drop the end program, are you saying?
Mr. Chairman,
There is a second.
Point of clarification, Chairman Leeson, in that case, would you delete the earlier reference to the 6-year program in that section in the second line?
And put that reference to holding public hearings on that up in the section related to the 6-year program.
Mr. Chairman, I think that isn't quite the intent. I think that we would come there quicker if we accepted the wording as Rick suggested with adoption of the budget and next year's capital of the operating and next year's capital improvement budget. because that's what we are adopting. We're not just adopting that without that 1 year's capital improvement budget.
Is there a second to Lisa's motion? There being no second? Second by Jane. And Lisa's motion was to,
Fix your program out, Mr. Chairman.
Lisa?
I don't see why we can't take where the budget hearing is and put that together with the operating and capital budget and the reference to the 6-year program put together with the 6-year program.
Well, would you read the
To take 1004 and the reference to holding the public hearings on the budget, put that in with the part on the budget and the part about the public hearings on 6-year program, put that in with the 6-year program. So you could have it budget and budget hearings, and 6-year program and 6-year program hearings.
All right. Are you suggesting a new section then?
No, I just threw that out as an idea. I just threw that out as an idea.
What's the
Well,
motion?
you have a motion, and I'm trying to get the motion.
The motion that I seconded was section 1004 to delete out of the end of the first line and 6-year program, and to delete the last 2 words and program.
Mr. Chairman, I've moved to amend by addition to add the words after proposed, operating and capital. It would then, well, if there's a second. All right. It would then read, the Assembly shall hold public hearings on the proposed operating and capital budget. And one hearing at least, so on and so forth. Now, this would then, could speak, and I think very possibly it's preferable to speak, to the approval of the 6-year capital improvement program. We're talking here about just the current year operating and capital budget.
Then your motion, your amendment is to add the words operating and capital budget after proposed budget.
After
There
proposed.
After proposed.
Now, there's one problem, and this was run into a problem when you're trying to talk on the floor here. If we have a situation that Bob Nelson's, the Bob Nelson's occurs in the city, and they're on the calendar fiscal year, where they approve the bond issue prior, items that are going on the bond issue, which is really implementing your capital improvement program, prior to the adoption of the next year's fiscal budget, are you operating in capital budget? Are we hamstringing them by this proposed amendment? Am I making that totally unclear?
Bob or Norm, have you any comment?
Well, the only question I had is that, I don't think this has come out at all. Holding a public hearing, does that mean you need an ordinance? You pass something by ordinance?
No.
We have discussed here tonight, but not being a public hearing, you bind yourself in the future.
Sherry?
And ordinance,
Hearing doesn't mean ordinance
yeah,
necessarily.
but I was just going to say an ordinance does require a hearing, but that's it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I've done as well as I think, I can, understanding this, and I think maybe many of us feel this way, that, and the language cleans up 1004. I hopefully will go back, though, and back to 1002 and provide for the acceptance. We can do this by directing Rick to do it, or for the next meeting, provide for the acceptance of the 6-year.
Mr. Chairman,
Sherry?
I would propose an amendment to 1004 by the addition of the words "for the next fiscal year" following the word "budget" in the first line.
I think
Now, this would be for the sake of consistency, since we just added that to one of the previous sections, 1003.
Second.
We have Amendment and a second. We're now, on the second amendment, is there a call for the question?
Yes.
We didn't call the question on first.
No, because now it's been amended again. We haven't gotten to that one yet, as I read it. Now, this amendment would add the words for the next fiscal year after the word budget.
Question.
Questions called. All those, oh, Jane?
I was on yours. The proposed operating and capital budget. Does that mean that the next year's, the sixth year of the PIP, and we're looking at that at the same time that we're looking at an
No,
operating budget?
this does not speak to the six-year capital improvements program. The capital budget would, just because of what it is going to be the first of those 6 years.
That's the wherewithal to implement the CIP.
Right.
For this coming year only. For this coming year only. For this next year only.
Would be I would look at that as to how that was going to be expended. Your bond issue might be for $20 million, and you're going to expend that over 5 years. It seems to me that when we talk in terms of capital budget, it's how we're going to expend it that year.
What I'm trying to do is get back to that question you were trying to ask, but I never understood. And I'm still not sure what your point was about that.
I think it's two separate issues, Jane.
Any further questions regarding adding for the next fiscal year?
I think it's just a terribly long encompassing sentence.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Now we go back to the amendment, adding operating and capital between proposed and budget. Question called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Now we go back to the motion as amended. The motion as amended would read to adopt the 1004
This is
with the
this is Mr. Garnett's draft of 1004.
Mr. Garnett's draft of 1004, which would read as follows, having dropped the and 6-year program and end program at the end.
Have we?
No, we're going to vote on
That's the
that.
way, that would be
When did we drop those?
We're going to decide on that.
That's what we're voting on now.
Well, I would like to speak to that.
All right, let me read it as it would read.
Okay.
The Assembly shall hold public hearings on the proposed operating and capital budget for the next fiscal year, one hearing at least 21 days after the budget is submitted to the Assembly, and one hearing at least 7 but not more than 14 days prior to the adoption of the budget. This would leave out those words, and 6-year program, and at the end, and program.
Now, did we hear from either of our fiscal experts on the deletion of those two things as to their feelings on it?
Norm?
I've got no problems with it if there is some specific provision made of how you handle a 6-year program. If it's just something you toss onto the Assembly and forget about, it's...
Mr. Joseph?
I really do feel strongly that the Assembly should pass on it. So often the Assembly is criticized for not having a broad policy view, and this really would compel that they do that. However, if there's an understanding, and not the binding one, but a consensus that we're going to go back and put it in 1002 where it more properly belongs, I can support the amendment.
Under those conditions, if it's a consensus of the commission, I would think that the next order of business after passing this would be to go back there if it's passed.
Yes, sir.
Question.
Questions called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Then we'll go back to 1002.
Mr. Garnett, would you like to do that now, or later in the evening or next week. I don't care.
After I finish my beer. So, Ms. Joseph, I don't think there's any problem. My only question is whether the proposal is that the 6-year program be adopted by ordinance or in some less formal manner, or what?
Mr. Chairman, don't we wish to suggest that the Assembly will hold hearings and approve of the concept decided upon, or adopt the plan as a concept for the following years? Or approve it. Establishing policy direction. Well, if you adopt it as a program, you have to revise it by ordinance also.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully suggest that we do this at our next meeting. It's in the minutes, will be in the minutes that we're going to do it. Because I don't know, I don't want to require them to adopt it either if it means that they're just rubber stamping. This consideration that has to be given to how we
I'd like to ask the financial people if they see any problem with adopting it by ordinance, with the understanding that each year one would be adopted by ordinance, which would revise the previous year's ordinance.
Well,
Or is that somebody else?
in my feeling of adoption, I didn't mean that, the thought that you had a public hearing and you adopted it, it was a binding thing. It was the fact that the adoption was a confirmation to the administration that the legislative body had approved the concept.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm uncomfortable in my years of observing what's happened to comprehensive plans and planning documents with just this kind of a waffle that unless something is mandated, we really limp along with kind of a half plan.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the whole problem though, Jim, is that you become, as you get out there, you're 5 years, at best, it's an educated guess. And it's, I think, just the technique we're worried about, because you really do make it very formal, and then when you come along, you're going to have to get a new one in either to rescind or amend or something. And it's obviously a good plan is really going to change every year. It's certainly going to become more specific. So I guess we're looking for some wording that can say, yeah, this has some meaning, but perhaps not to give it the full force of an ordinance. Maybe Bob.
I think we could turn that back to the Charter Production Committee, and if either of you have any suggestion on wording or on method, give it to Rick or to any member of the Charter Production Committee.
I think Nelson had a comment.
I think you did. Let's hear it.
Mr. Chairman, I really wanted to add here, in my own mind, again, I think the budget for next year is a legal document, binds the administration to expend the funds in a certain manner. The 6-year plan or the 5-year plan is a very important document, and it's certainly be approved by the Assembly. There's no doubt about that. Now, whether you want to go to the formal formality of an ordinance, I think this is going a little too far, because it's a flexible plan. Any plan is flexible, and to bind it into legal terms, I think, is going a little far. Quite frankly, I think if we could define the word adoption and approval, you could probably just add the word approval and say adoption of the budget and approval of the program on this sentence, and it would satisfy me. If you're referring to adoption as an ordinance, then approval is just approving the plan. But I think there should be a distinction there. The plan is very important, there's no doubt about that. But, I look at the adoption of the budget as a real binding legal document, and while a plan is something that will change.
Do you feel that on, okay, the wording that we put on our operating and capital budget in the budget and adopting that, was that going too far?
No, except
Because
that,
that's the 1 year now.
except that here, to me, a budget is a budget, whether it's capital or operating. The words operating and capital really don't.
But they're together, they're the same to you.
A budget is a budget.
But it
just happens to be a
includes-
construction budget versus a operation. So it doesn't make any difference necessarily in this line.
Is there any further discussion?
We've agreed that 1002 will be modified and returned.
Yes. We'll turn that back to Charter Production Committee for report. Mr. Josephson? You've got 1005 remaining the same and 1006 next, is that right?
1005 really, I think, does remain the same as far as the committee is concerned. I did note that capital budget might be unclear, but apparently it is not. So we have no recommendations for changing 1005. 1006 was considered to be at best unnecessary and at worst mischievous. The Assembly's power to make supplemental appropriations may be inherent, as I understand it, so we're not really conveying any additional powers. In subsection B, again, the Assembly has authority to issue and sell notes in anticipation of revenues, and the language would appear to tie that to emergency situations. As Mr. Garnett's written comment, and he had talked to both Mr. Nelson and Mr. Levesque.
Actually, the word "to" should be "the," but that's okay.
The comment indicates that revenue and tax anticipation notes are frequently sold in non-emergency situations to cover operating costs prior to receipt of expected income. And then the committee suggested that the last sentence, the note shall be repaid prior to the end of the fiscal year next following, is probably more properly in Article 12, municipal borrowing, and Section 1202, limitations on borrowing, in 1006.
Norm, are we, by changing the fiscal year, going to be able to get away from this tax anticipation note business?
I doubt it. Probably to a lesser degree than what we've experienced. To much lesser degree, but not entirely. This whole provision here of 1006, as long as I'm speaking, scares the daylights out of me. And it's basically because we've always utilized tax anticipation note or revenue anticipation notes for those revenues that were definitely anticipated or are coming in during the fiscal year, but maybe you haven't realized them yet, but you will. So in other words, for instance, you take the city of Anchorage, starts operating on its budget on January the 1st. Taxes don't come in until July and September. So they have to borrow. But the thing is, if taxes are levied, there is a true receivable because it's a revenue coming in. They're really not saying, well, we're going to have a supplemental appropriation and we can do it and we'll levy a tax next year. That's the problem that I've dealt with.
In other words, this has said something we really didn't intend.
I don't know.
If you got that impression, we had only intended for this that would be covered in this next tax levy is what we were thinking about, but I see where we put that next fiscal year that it could be a year and a half away, and we didn't intend that.
Just so we're all clear, do either of you have any objection to the deletion of 1006 if we transfer that last sentence to Article 12?
I don't have any objection.
Mr. Chairman, I so move, or I move that we adopt the report of the Commission Production Committee as it relates to 1006.
Second.
Chairman,
Mr. Parsons.
am I hearing that we have a concept of tax anticipation notes, which by definition means that we have to borrow money and pay interest, therefore raising the cost of government?
Mr. Chairman.
No?
It would be budgeted for.
No, the question that it's budgeted for is not the thing, but the fact that you have tax anticipation notes rather than a pay-as-you-go thing means you've got to borrow money and pay interest on it. Is there not some way that we can get around this in the writing of the new charter?
Tax a year ahead of time.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think it's to be said, for instance, we are going to be adopting a budget in December for the next fiscal year. By state law, we levy taxes as of January 1 for that year. We do not set the mill levy until May. Tax bills are then sent and the money is, collected for that full year. We have to have tax anticipation notes really unless we get a glorious position of lots of surplus funds, to fund the government operation until those tax revenues start coming in. There's no other way to handle it. Is there?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Is there not another way to handle it?
Mr. Chairman, really this goes both ways. When you have a surplus of cash, and we should, you of course are earning on that, we should distinguish between appropriations and cash. And all we're saying here is that the appropriations have been made legally by the Assembly, and that's our budget. Cash flow is such, since the taxes aren't collected until July, that we must borrow cash-wise to meet that appropriation. Now, during the latter part of the year, I'm sure there's a surplus, and this municipality is earning quite a bit of money.
Do you think the push operation or nearly so?
Minus plus,
Okay.
with the plus coming after the minus.
Very, very definitely. Of course, last year it was very much a plus.
I would like to interpose here, if I may, and step out of my role for a moment, and that this is one of the things I have a great fear of. And Norm, I think you can tell me, and maybe Bob can, that there have been times when tax anticipation notes have been made in early in the year, extended throughout the year, and been rolled over on December 31st for an ensuing year, and rolled over again for an ensuing year, not paid out of the revenues of the year in which they were. And I want to see that.
We're going
Absolutely.
to, Frank. That's in the motion.
Well, I don't see that.
The motion was in the committee report to place that in Article 12, Section 1202.
The note shall be repaid prior to the end of the fiscal year next following.
That-
That's even carrying it over one rollover, and I don't even believe in that.
We don't- This is what we,
This year's tax anticipation, you borrow in January, anticipation of taxes in July and September, or any time up to September, you should not have that by the end of the year. It should be gone. It shouldn't be the next fiscal year.
Mr. Chairman, let's make a move to amend that motion to say the same fiscal year then when we move it over to the other place instead of the next.
No, the reason I brought this up, and I feel strongly about it, I'd like to have the comments of Norm and Bob.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I can see this, if we're going to operate on a calendar year, I see no problems in meeting what you're stating, but there will still exist a problem with the schools. Do you see what I'm getting at? Because the Assembly will have appropriated from July 1 to June 30th of the next year, and yet they will fund them in 2 tax calendar years. And so your monies won't come in until July, when you'll really be going at least a month or 2 over the fiscal year for the schools only.
Well, Mr. Chairman, then you have the additional problem of the emergency appropriations, that the emergency, that the true emergency that comes up in November of the calendar year, and what you would be saying if you do as you're, would amend, that it would have to be paid back in that year, and obviously that would be impossible. You'd have to roll it over. So, that was one of the rationales for having a section in on the emergency.
Mr. Chairman, the way that we've been operating now, I believe it's with the state laws, which works real good. It says 1 year from date of issue.
And then if that covers the tax year, it has to. I think that would be even better right now.
Well, that's
Then
not
let's try a motion in that. That's in that direction.
Should there be any words in there that the assembly may not roll over or rewrite? Such a, no.
We know what he means.
Again, I'm not.
It says they repaid, doesn't it?
No, I was just going to suggest that, reiterate that we would take, as a committee, we would take up that sentence when we come to 1202, limitations. And if we don't reach that tonight, I would ask that our secretary or Mr. Garnett take the language Mr. Levesque gave so we can consider that 1 year.
All right, the motion in front of the House then is to, moved by Harris, seconded by Sherry, to delete paragraph Roman 1 and of section 1006 and add the last sentence of subparagraph B for consideration under Article 12, 1202.
Mr. Chairman, that's all of 1006 except the last.
All 1006 except for the last sentence of paragraph B. Questions would be moved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman, do you like the way we're speaking up?
All right.
Isn't that neat?
Loud and clear.
Great.
Except I didn't hear James.
There's a,
roll it over to
1007, Mr. Chairman, is going to be pretty tough. And I noticed that my summary of what the committee did isn't consistent with the attorney's notes, and I may be wrong because I may not have understood this well enough. Let me suggest, Rick, that you talk to this first because, on your deletion of subparagraph A of 1007.
Chairman, I think the general idea was to be consistent with our deletion of the provision above that talked about supplementary, the power of the Assembly to make supplemental appropriations. I think, it is my opinion, that as a matter of the Assembly's authority, it has equal capacity to reduce appropriations as to make supplemental appropriations. And we needn't spell out the one or the other. Let's see here. Okay, I don't know that there's too much more behind the deletion of paragraph A. There is a question about this, we do need to face the question of what to do with appropriations for debt service, also with later provisions dealing with transfer of debt service. And the question is whether it is important fiscally to treat an appropriation once made for debt service as really inviolate so that it can't be reduced under any circumstances or transferred to another category under any circumstances. Some of my discussion with finance people indicated that it's not really important to have that sort of a lock on an initial appropriation for debt service. The obligation to repay debt service is fixed and remains whatever is done with an appropriation, and there may be circumstances where an initial appropriation for debt service really overestimates the requirement and that you would have a fund in a sense, paralyzed unless you could recognize the circumstances and do something with it. So I don't know, that's the thought on subparagraph A. Bob, I don't know, Bob, if you can comment on that, I'm not sure.
Well, my only thought is that when you get down to subparagraph B, you say in there that somebody may transfer part or all of any unencumbered balance. And really, we're speaking to debt service in the same manner. Any unencumbered or balance or any balance that does not have a legal hold on.
As to B, gentlemen, the question that we had was whether the presence of that limitation on the transfer of appropriations for debt service gave some reassurance in terms of bond sales or something of that kind that has a utility to us if you keep it in.
Well, there is a mandate, right?
Pardon me?
There is a mandate, right?
In the
Municipal bond sales that your first requirement to meet your debt, right?
That's what I understand. In the instrument authorizing the sale of the bonds.
So this is not, the bond buyer wouldn't be particularly upset if this were deleted because he would have it in his instrument anyway.
Well, then, Bob, if we deleted, if we delete that one in B, does that create a problem with you about this? He may transfer all or part of any unencumbered balance. Do you think that opens the door that in the matter of the bonds that he could transfer in bond funds?
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, if we delete this no transfer of funds is effective until a record transfer. Wait a minute,
Why don't we stick with A for a minute?
okay, let's stick with A. Right, I jumped out of context here.
The reason in my report I said that the committee only felt that the second sentence was unnecessary was that some members of the committee thought the first sentence had usefulness. That is, if the mayor determined the revenues to be less than appropriations for the fiscal year, that the assembly should get the early warning signal and he should be obligated by charter to bring that to
Give the early warning signal, not wait until it had happened if you knew about it, it's going to happen ahead of time.
Okay, that I think is a separate issue from...
Well, Mr. Chairman, Bob or Norm, do you see any problem in A of dropping the assembly by resolution may reduce any appropriation other than appropriation for debt service?
No, I don't see any use for it.
Norm?
We're at 10:07.
It just gives them the, it says may, but
They have that in, I would agree with Holly, they have that already. Paul?
Mr. Chairman, I move to amend by deletion in 1007A, the sentence beginning the assembly by resolution may reduce.
Second. It's been moved and seconded that we delete, amend by deletion, the 1007A, leaving out the second sentence. That is leaving in the third sentence and the first sentence. Is that correct, Marvin?
Mm-hmm.
First. Is there any discussion?
Frank, who was that?
Mr. Josephson.
Question.
Question is called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, so ordered. Is there further discussion regarding 1007B?
The information was that the matter of recording the transfer with the municipal clerk was considered, I think, unnecessary, and that as Mr. Garnett said, the existence of the last sentence
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion if it's in order.
Motion is in order.
Delete the sentence beginning in B, beginning no transfers of funds. And then again, delete the sentence at the end saying no transfers may be made from appropriations. Which does what Mr. Josephson said. His two sentences out is
I'll
a sentence in
second for
between.
purposes of discussion. Mr. Chairman, could we hear from Norm and Bob on that, please? On deleting those, whether they feel that would be harmful?
And also from Mr. Freeman.
Mhm.
Discussion?
I think basically to begin with, that the municipal department or agency was added in there to clarify the fact that the mayor could only transfer, the assembly transferred between municipal departments or agencies while the mayor was committed only within a department or agency. Now, am I correct in assuming here that the commission feels that there should be no restrictions placed such as that?
First, maybe we should deal with promotion first and then go into that question of categories and appropriations, that language.
Well, I had left that in. I had left
Yes.
that categories and so forth
I
in.
think we might discuss that part of it.
Then the motion, as you would have it, Mary, would read to drop the two sentences starting with no transfer.
That's right.
And the 1007B would then read, except as to the school budget, the mayor may transfer all or part of any unencumbered balance between categories within the budget of any municipal department or agency. I think categories was changed to appropriations. The school board may transfer part or all of any unencumbered balance between appropriations within the school budget. The assembly may transfer part or all of any unencumbered balance from one department or agency to another.
That's the way it would read, according to my amendment.
See any problem?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, may I ask, should the word between there be within, based on our discussion?
Well, I was going to comment on the first sentence, but you were talking about the last
Okay.
part of this paragraph. I do have a comment on that first sentence. I think we've got a couple of words.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to get out of order. We can do it just as this.
We have before us a motion to drop those two sentences.
Question.
Question has been called. All those in
Well,
favor?
Mr. Chairman, I would,
For not adopting the whole business.
all right.
Mr. Justice?
The subsection will still be before us for further discussion.
Yes.
We're just dropping those two sentences. All
Well,
those,
I'm still curious about that last sentence. I remember we discussed it at some length when we put it in, and we feel now it's not necessary.
That's what they tell us.
Very often the statement was that the appropriation for debt service exceeds the actual requirements. That you err on the side of making sure you have appropriated enough. Would that be correct? You never err, I know.
I had found it to be the other way around.
In the event that you err on that side.
Mr. Chairman, on that, I do see my notes here, need for the bond council. Did we ever check this out to see if it is actually necessary to write it in for the bond council? He said no.
You talking to me?
I don't know what.
He said that the instrument that the bond buyer takes already has.
Spells that out.
Yes.
Question.
your observation, Bob?
Yes, the requirement is in bond ordinance. But, I don't know what bond council would say. I don't think you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to take this whole business by the bond council, by some other people familiar with bonds, say Walforth and Flint, for their once-over-week plan to do that in any case.
A motion is to drop those two sentences. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Now, is there Any other discussion on 1007B?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear from Mr. Nelson.
First subject, this afternoon I discussed this particular section with Mr. Garnett, and we talked about specifying municipal department or agency as opposed to appropriation. And the more we talked about it, the more I began to think that do we really want to say department or agency? Are we really talking about appropriations? The reason I say this is somewhere down the line, very likely, the new government may be on what they call a program budget, where the departments aren't given the appropriation, but the program itself is given the appropriation. And also, if you remember, during our earlier work sessions, there was quite a bit of discussion as to what is a department, what is an agency, what is a division. And therefore, I suggested that we change. Now, here I think there might have been a misunderstanding. Mr. Garnett changed category to appropriation. I think the word category should have been left in there, but that within, instead of within a budget, within an appropriation. The word budget should have been changed to appropriation. This way, the Assembly then sets the standard or the guidelines as to what is an appropriation. They may want to make it as large or as small as they want. But within that appropriation, whether it's a department, whether it's a program, whether it's a one-man office, then they have control over that appropriation. And within that appropriation, you have various categories, whatever you want to call them, line items or sub-programs. And I felt that if we quoted the word appropriation rather than specific departments or agencies, that it would be clearer.
Well, how would the sentence in 1007B read if you had your...
Except as to the school budget, the mayor may transfer all or part of any unencumbered balance between categories within an appropriation. And then the Assembly may transfer part or all of any unencumbered balance from one appropriation to another.
Mr. Chairman, let's have Norm's comments on those wordings.
And what you were saying, you skipped that part about the school board.
Yeah, well, he probably found that all right.
It would be the same, I believe, appropriations.
Appropriations within the school budget. Norm, did you have any?
Well, the only question I've got is organizational. Whether you have a program budget, you still have functions or, such as the health department or planning or what have you. They always remain as such. And what are you going to call them? I think the way that Bob has suggested here would allow the mayor to make transfers from planning to health, or from health to other departments.
Mr. Chairman, if there are no mind, I didn't mean to interrupt. As I understand it, and both of you correct me, it seemed to me that one feature of doing it this way is in a sense to give the Assembly more flexibility in determining what type of appropriation the mayor can transfer as opposed to the type of appropriation which the Assembly must transfer. That is, the Assembly, in budgeting in the first place, can budget either very precisely, item by item, or very generally to an entire department. And depending on which of those courses it chooses, funds can be transferred by the mayor or not. Maybe it presents the policy question as to whether the Assembly could usefully employ that flexibility.
Mr. Chairman,
Mary?
if we use the word program, we might be getting down to even smaller than a department that he couldn't transfer within. Like we might say community schools would be a separate program from the general recreation program in the Recreation Parks and Rec Department. Whereas if we stick with departments, he might transfer between the community schools and the general recreation department at will. And it might really materially affect the program. I'm not at all sure, but I'd go along with Bob's suggestion of within, if we use the word appropriations, program appropriations? What would we end up with if we said program appropriations?
Well, you don't know that you're going to go into a program budget.
That's a term.
Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't recommend using the word program. I think the word appropriation is a standard term no matter where you go in at least in governmental account. And if you take a look at the state's budget statute when it comes out, they condense down this huge document into maybe 6 or 7 pages. And if you look at that, you will see both programs and departments in there, depending on how they want to appropriate the money. And depending, here again, on what controls they may want to, on a department that they're very concerned about, they may want to nail it down much closer than, say, a larger group of departments.
Mr. Joseph?
I understand this is a very difficult area, as well as you can see from this morning's paper where the governor vetoed part of the budget document because he thought it impaired his prerogatives. It's the same issue at that level, I think. But as I understand it, and I missed part of this, that there's a very different policy from the original language to the substitute. In the one case, in the original charter, am I right that the mayor could transfer unencumbered balance within a department? That is, within the Department of Environmental Protection, he could transfer funds for sewage to air pollution or something like that. But I'm not sure what is meant by the substitute language. I mean, would he be able to argue that the general budget, operating budget, is an appropriation, and that he could have plenary authority to move environmental conservation money to public works?
Mr. Chairman, it's not for the mayor to decide what an appropriation is. It's for the Assembly. If the Assembly says the entire budget is one appropriation, Mr. Mayor, you go ahead and transfer it within, then that is an appropriation. Or the Assembly can say your fire department is an appropriation. Or the Assembly could say some small, say the firehouse station number 3 out here is an appropriation. But they can establish the appropriation level. This is
Bob, one question. How do they say that? What do you mean they say that? Do they, in the budget document, do they say appropriation number 1, 2?
I would imagine that the mayor would make recommendations as to what appropriation levels there should be in the Assembly as they pass the budget. My point is that we're trying to define. Now, in the past, the city of Anchorage has, in its language, in fact, in its charter, says department. But this is interpreted rather loosely at times because there are certain appropriations in the budget that really aren't departments. For instance, the
Bicentennial.
Why don't you say the balance of all programs, such as what you call some of the federal programs that you have as maybe not the personnel or some other department?
To me, a program is very vague and not easily defined, but an appropriation, as far as I know, is pretty well understood. That this is the appropriation, and within that appropriation there are categories. And maybe,
Mr. Chairman, could we clear this up by having Rick define that the Assembly may determine how small the appropriation is, or how large the appropriation is, or
The
something
limit
of
of
this
the
sort?
appropriation concept.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I could certainly look into that. As I say, as I understand it, which may not be too far, an appropriation is a creature of the Assembly, and the Assembly, in the extent to which it itemizes an allocation of funds, determines what an appropriation is for a particular area. If it itemizes an appropriation in great detail, each of those details is, quote, an appropriation, and the mayor could not transfer among those appropriations. If it chooses not to itemize so precisely, then the mayor could transfer within that block.
And if he abuses it, then the next year they come back and they make it more specific.
I think that's my understanding of it.
Mr. Chairman,
Tom?
it seems to me that this gets right down to the philosophy of the whole thing, and that is that the only real control that the Assembly has under this system over the executive branch is through the budget. And we've seen in the past the punitive actions of just slicing a whole department's budget because there's one program or two programs that the department is doing that the Assembly members don't like. This would give them, I think, the flexibility to make different appropriations and thereby reduce the scope of a program within a department through the budget and maybe increase the scope of another program which the mayor could not shuffle around. If we leave it the way it is now, the mayor could then move those things around within the department after the budget was passed.
That's true.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good analysis,
That's true. He could,
Is there,
the way it's
is there
priced
further
to run.
discussion?
Do we have a motion on the floor?
No, we
for
do
the
not.
change?
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to that.
Sure.
I would make a motion that Rick try to define the word appropriation and that he bring back reworded 1007B showing appropriation in each place that he thinks is proper for our consideration at the next production committee meeting and see if we've gotten where we want to be.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Parker. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I think that we are going to have problems if we don't dispose of some of these things now. We're running out of time, and I think it was clearly stated by Mr. Nelson the proper wording. I would agree with Mary's suggestion that we attempt to define the word appropriation, and we can look at that definition later and act on that. But I would prefer to add the words in and would...
Mr. Chairman?
Can I amend her motion to do that?
Yes, you may.
To have 1007B read, and Bob scream if I misstate this. Except as to the school budget, the mayor may transfer all or part of any encumbered balance between categories unencumbered balance between categories within an appropriation. Is that correct? Okay. The school board may transfer part or all of any unencumbered balance from one appropriation to another within the school budget. Okay. The assembly may transfer part or all of any unencumbered balance from one appropriation to another.
Second.
Tom?
One question on the school. I'm not sure if the word appropriation, because actually the way it is now, the school budget is one appropriation. You know, so categories I think would be more appropriate for the schools.
Okay, I would make my motion to leave the school sentence unchanged.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Parker?
So what Sherry's motion would say would be that the mayor and the assembly can transfer funds from one place to another. They both have the power to do transferring. Same type of transferring.
No, Mr. Chairman, Lisa, my motion says that only within one particular appropriation can the mayor make changes, but the assembly can change from one appropriation to another appropriation.
I mean, if I have $500 in this appropriation here, I can transfer part of that $500 to another appropriation within that appropriation.
This is very much like the state situation situation where as I understand it, the governor can take funds appropriated to the office of the governor from Pioneers Home to the planning.
Capital site selection.
Yes, hopefully. And
Take care of my interests.
on the other hand, if his desire is to switch appropriations from the Department of Commerce to the Department of Public Works, then he has to go to a legislative audit process.
I think the problem too is that if you have one fund, you call it the general fund, or you call it the sewer fund, or what have you, and when you make your appropriation, you say, okay, we appropriate $10 million. You don't say so much for health, so much for planning, so much for DEQ, and all that. So the wording that I've seen now is that this would give the mayor the opportunity to transfer within that fund anywhere he saw fit.
If they choose to appropriate it in a lump.
Right, but I can't foresee where you'd have a 3-page ordinance.
Only if they saw some reason to make it really specific. Do you see any problem with this wording there?
He does.
You know, Mr. Chairman, you can carry this to the extreme both ways. The mayor could create a super department that encompasses the whole government and say, okay, here's the department, and I can transfer all the funds to the department, you know, so. Now, how the appropriations will be passed, I would assume that the assembly would specify this is what the various appropriations.
What I'd like to see happen, and to meet that objection, is I don't know that we have to define the term appropriations, but something that says that for the purpose of this article, the Assembly shall specify what constitutes an appropriation, so that that puts the Assembly on notice at the time of the appropriation that they have that authority in advance to curtail transfers by specifying. As I understand what you said, they can do that. Mm-hmm. Right?
You talking to me?
I'm talking Bob.
That would be my understanding when they pass the budget. That would be sure.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be frank, I'm much more comfortable with the traditional approach that, talks in terms of departments and agencies. And I see Bob's problem. Well, I think one example might be in the borough where you have the public safety, which brings in the building department, which brings in the fire department, and several other dog control, and so on and so forth. Under the way that we have it presently now, it seems to me that the mayor would be able to take away all the dog funds and give it to the fire fund. And perhaps that is not desirable. If we're talking in terms of an ordinance that specifies that the Assembly shall appropriate, say, 4 dogs and 4 fire and so on, breaking down the departmental budget, so to speak, then you could limit the power of the mayor, and that's what you're seeing. But what if the Assembly doesn't? And that's really what you're seeing. And then we have given the mayor all of this other power. So here we're having a fear of is the legislative body going to do their job?
Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that when they pass the budget, they can say that Section 1 can say each paragraph of the following ordinance shall be deemed a separate appropriation for the purpose.
Any unencumbered balance between categories within an appropriation. The school board may transfer part or all of any unencumbered balance between categories within the school budget. The Assembly may transfer part or all of any unencumbered balance from one appropriation to another.
Any further
Just clarification, if I may. Is it the intent of the maker of this motion that there would be a section somewhere that would explain appropriations?
Yes. And I did say that in my original motion, that
Okay.
appropriation for the purposes of this section would be clarified.
In that regard, I will support this with the idea that if we cannot properly define appropriation,
We'll come
I
back
will
with
come
something.
Back to you.
We'll come back with something.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? There's no further discussion on the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Joe, I like
One
your...
in opposition, Ms. Parker. Let the record show.
Okay. We thought that section 10.08 was perfect, and that
Please agree.
10.09, I think, was, we had no comments. We did raise the matter of this $1 million figure in 10.09. I think there was one opinion was that perhaps instead of referring to a finite sum, given the inflation and so forth, that it ought to be maybe a percentage of a budget. Another view was the $1 million was too high. Another said it just left the way it is. So we didn't make any recommendation on 10.08 or 10.09, but we do call the issue of the $1 million to your.
Is there any discussion regarding 1009, the issue being presented by the Charter Production Committee, that the $1 million mentioned therein is either too small, too big, or
Not
not advisable?
If we were to set a percentage on it, what percentage would we set? And how
Well,
would we base that?
Probably, if we were going to do that, we'd probably try to relate that to what exists, and with the view that
The percentage would remain the same throughout. Have our financial advisors any comment upon that?
And Mr. Chairman, if I read this correctly, that the governmental entity would be able to enter into a lease purchase agreement for anything up to $1 million. But if it was in excess of $1 million, you'd have to go to the voters.
Correct.
What's the problem with that?
Merely a question being brought up by the Charter Production Committee. They had no recommendation on it.
Mr. Chairman, some of us felt that it should be 500,000 rather than $1 million.
We have our particular office building that we're in now is on a 5-year lease. Oh, this is lease. Okay. I'm sorry, it's just a lease.
Strict, straight lease. Clean lease, no buyback.
No, but boy, that sure did bug a lot of people that had their input to voters.
Mr. Chairman, there is a legal thing in the state that we can't take leases for more than 1 year, so we are in trouble on that one if we want to. Anybody wants to question?
Overruled that one. As far as I know. Yeah, I'm not.
Is there?
That was in the 29.
This isn't how
Home marriage, this is home rule, right?
Yes.
So we'll probably supersede.
Bob, did you have any comment on it?
No, my only comment is that, here again, you're putting a number into a document that must go to the voters for any change. And I think they're rather restricted. What is $1 million going to mean 10 years from now? It may mean nothing. I think a percent of assessed value or something like this might have a little more bearing.
$1 million.
I don't have any strong feelings one way or
$1
the other.
million right now would be about $500,000 in the area. Is that right? Jane?
Mr. Chairman, I don't remember the original discussion about that particular provision. What was the major incident that people were citing as a lease purchase agreement that had cost more money than people had wanted?
Borough building.
What is that reference?
Mr. Josephson?
Well, there's been a problem in the past, I think. That may not be the best example, but there's been other state level where when voters turn down a general obligation bond proposal for capital lease purchase arrangements circumvented it at great public cost.
Jane?
Or in relation to the $1 million figure, it would seem that it seems silly to put a dollar figure in here when you get the document that would be around for a while. Perhaps we could figure out what percentage that is of such valuation and whatever. That's a good
Roughly 0.5%. Let's see.
$2.6 billion now.
What would it have been 2 years ago?
0.5%.
I think it depends too whether the commission intends that if our assessed valuation in a few years from now is $5 billion or $8 billion, and if this amount here is not firm, that you would say, okay, because we've got that assessed valuation, now you can go out and get 5 times more. You know, that's
I don't really go along with that idea. I'd rather like to stick with the number we've got, or even smaller.
The chart can be amended rather easily into this way we're
Arrange-
going, under this arrangement. I think we just
If there's no further discussion on it, we'll go on to 10:11.
In 1011, the issue is whether the audit should be submitted to the Assembly within 90 days or completed within 90 days. Mr. Nelson, you want to address this?
Well, I'm not sure I recognize some of these folks that Mr.
It was a grudge.
I would prefer that you just dispense with whatever is said here. My only comments are what I mentioned before, that from a practical standpoint, completion within the 90-day period seems more reasonable to me than expecting to get the final product with beautiful pictures and binding and all this out within the 90 days, which then you're assuming the Assembly is going to meet on that 90th day instead of 2 days after the 90th. The city charter right now requires that the audit be completed within 90 days.
Or at least I just
legal
showed it.
requirements are met, but I don't intend to see that any further because Mr. Reed and I have already discussed it.
Bob, I certainly didn't mean to libel you there. I
No,
thought that was pretty fair.
Is the city audit being completed in 90 days?
Yes.
Is it being presented within 90 days?
No, I don't think it ever has been presented as such. It's usually maybe the first or second meeting after the 90 days. It's actually presented in its finished form.
Your point is that there just isn't enough time to do all that.
Well, it depends on how you present it. Now, I understand Mr. Levesque mentioned that he's under that requirement apparently, so he presents Xerox copies of the work or the forms. And really, is this what the Assembly wants? You know, to be that strict down that they're going to be looking at the Xerox copies? I think a reasonable period after the 90 days to get the report printed and all the niceties put on it, the binding and this sort of thing, is not being unreasonable.
Colored pictures.
Colored pictures.
How long does it take to get the colored pictures, Norm? It seems to me it's a month or so afterwards. We get the pretty pictures.
Yeah, we start on that a long time before. It's part of the planning for the audit. We've got all the pictures and everything all done before the audit is done. But again, I don't know what the city charter currently reads. Does it say completed and presented, or does it say completed?
It does not mention presented, it mentions completed.
Then it would seem, though, in this state then, that we would have more time to...
Independent audit shall be made of all accounts, at least in the, shall be made by a certified public accountants employed by the council and shall be completed within 90 days following the close of the fiscal year. And an analysis of the audit shall be made public by the council. From a practical standpoint, we normally have that report the first meeting after the 90 days. Occasionally, it'll be the second meeting. Like this year, it happened to be the second meeting.
Why wouldn't we say 90 days on completion and no later than 120 days for presentation? That's still...
Well, I don't think that's really required. if you have a 90-day period, certainly the administration isn't going to sit on it for any longer.
I would move to amend section 1011, second sentence to read, "The report of the audit shall be completed within 90 days following the close of the fiscal year."
Second.
Move. Second. Change the wording to read, "will be completed within 90 days, close of the preceding fiscal year."
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that Lisa intended leaving the report of the audit. I think she meant the audit shall be completed
Yeah,
within 90 days
yeah.
following the close of the fiscal
If I
year.
may speak to the motion just momentarily. Every bank in this community, a $400 million bank, $350 million bank, $60 million, $100 million bank, all finish their audits. 4 banks that are being audited now, they all finish their audits within the first 30 days after the end of the year. But it does take some pre-planning, and it does take some audit staff ahead of time. You just can't just audit and start at December 31st and audit for the year back. You gotta have audit staff doing it, outside audit staff doing it first. That's my whole argument. It can be done. It could be done by the 30 days after the year end.
I have a question of banks is complex as government.
Well, the
Nothing
number of
so
items, I think they're pretty close to complex. Individually, every detail's got to be verified in some manner for an audit, for a true audit. And I do feel it can't be done if you start on the last day of the year and you're going back to try to audit for the full year. It's just not going to work.
Do you object to the amendment?
I would prefer to see it as it was. That's all
He thinks it should be both submitted and completed and submitted.
I withdraw from further conversation. Any further discussion?
I'd like to have comments. I'd like to have comments of Mr. Levesque and Bob Nelson on that business of starting the audit before the end of the year. Right? Do you agree that it is possible or impossible?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is done now. We start our audit in September, and this is quite normal. And Mr. Reed is correct. I sat in on an audit once that we finished on the 15th of January. We did quite a bit of work before December 1st. But it is normal to do a substantial amount of interim work right now. We have to do it before year end. The test work and confirmation of receivables and inventories and so on. I'm merely pointing, and we could present it within 90 days. I'm merely saying I don't think it's that critical of an item as long as the audit is completed and has been finished. And from a practical standpoint, I think that you are restricting it by making the submission within 90 days.
I would want to hear from both of them.
Well, I have no problem with the completion within 90 days, but there is I say a small problem in getting it out of the printers, because if the independent auditors turn up after 90 days, back to the report and everything is okay, here's 90 days, it's all done, you still have to give a certain amount of time for the printer to put it all together. And this is why I took the route of making Xerox copies ahead of time and give it to the assembly. At least I met the requirements.
Well, I guess I'm trying to back up and ask if it is possible to start earlier. Is that going to cost more on the audit? Or that's really what I'm asking, I think, if we did say submitted as well, because I do think it is an unnecessary expense to go through all that Xeroxing, the financial report as well as printing.
We only need 11 copies.
But
Well,
We waste a lot of paper
We're
anyhow.
bogging down, Mr.
All right.
Chairman.
Question?
I'm
I'm
You wish
only
to call?
on bog ourselves.
Would you call for the question?
Bog.
Question.
Question's been called for. The motion is to, change it to read the report.
No, the audit.
The audit shall be completed within 90 days following the close of the fiscal year. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
2 opposed.
3.
3? 3 opposed. So it's passed. Mr. Josephson?
Now, there are comments from the attorney that have to do with some comments in section 11 and 12. If you want to go through those, we have not treated them as a committee, Mr. Chairman. So it might, it's up to the group as to whether it wanted to go ahead on the basis of these comments into 11 and 12. Talk generally with the 3 experts here on various financial matters that may come up. There are also in your materials Rick's work apropos of what we did last week in sections 3 and 9 and 7, implementing the changes that were directed to be made or presented back here tonight.
I would feel myself it'd probably be best to catch those back ones if we could. However, with Norm and Bob Freeman here, maybe we'd better go ahead and see if there's anything in 1103 or others that you've looked at that would require some input from them.
Maybe they would like to comment on Articles 11 and 12 generally, just based on, so we can get firsthand whatever comments they have. Let's do it.
Any one of you gentlemen have any open comment or specific?
On 11, I've got no problems. I've read that through. Appears to be okay. On 12, I've had someone bring up to my attention that it's on 1204, the financial programming is a very ambiguous word in there. It's been misinterpreted. I guess probably the commission's already been.
Which wording is that, Norm?
There's no persons. 1204.
The whole thing, you mean?
Yeah. Relating to financial programming. What does that mean? The restriction of business. Mr. Chairman, the suggested, or at least the language for discussion under section 1203 deals with some of what Norm's talking about, I believe. What I did here was strike the fairly detailed reference to the people who couldn't bid on bonds and just add up into section 1203 that the Assembly, in setting out the form and manner of the sale of bonds, should set up some sort of limitation. I recall that Sheila Gallagher, I believe, in her letter, indicated that the term financial programming, to exclude anyone who had been involved in financial programming from participating in a bond issue, might be reaching pretty widely.
Well, Mr. Chairman, so you're adopting then 1204, Rick, which we don't have before us, and just adding that.
What I was suggesting essentially was striking 1204 and putting the idea in more general form up into 1203, as indicated on this little proof sheet.
How's that sound?
I support dropping that whole paragraph. I believe it's state law right now that you can't do this anymore. I believe the home rule cities are under that particular phase. The city of Anchorage does not have this in the charter or an ordinance. However, they have it in their contract with the consultant. Without prior approval of the council, they cannot bid on it. The situation may arise when you can't get a bid from anybody except maybe the person you're working with, and I think this kind of restriction.
Bob, take a look at, do you have the revision there on page 6 of 1203, form and manner of sale? See if you feel that might be appropriate.
I think that would be appropriate. More appropriate than
Mr. Chairman, I would move to strike 1204 and amend 1203 as outlined or as presented by Mr. Garner.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we strike 1204 and amend 1203 in the manner provided on page 6 of Mr. Garner's recommendation. Shall read, the assembly by ordinance shall provide for the form and manner of sale of bonds and notes, including reasonable limitation upon the sale of bonds and notes to financial consultants of the municipality. Is there any discussion?
Question?
Question has been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Joe, do you have something?
Did Mr. Nelson or Mr. Freeman have any comments on 11 or 12?
I have a comment on 1206.
1206.
I believe section 11 discussed, given back to Mr. Barnett indicated that he has a suggestion from our public works director. I support it, and I don't have any problem.
Yes, as part of the attachment, part of every commissioner's package should include a letter from Lee Browning. Let's see.
We also have a
Bob,
letter
that doesn't
from
really
Swain,
deal
I
with
believe.
Article 12, does it?
No, I just meant, I'm skipping over 11.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I think the last provision in Article 12 that we had discussed, and it's on your suggested language for me, is the 1206, where we talk about, in the original, it's interest and profits from investments. And we talked at some length yesterday and today, I did that as with Bob, about problems with some of that terminology, whether the way it is now, on the one hand, is under-inclusive, and then it doesn't refer to the proceeds from the sale themselves, but only to interest and profits. And possibly, on the other hand, is over-restrictive in that it talks about retirement, using those monies only for retirement, rather than, for instance, something more like recall of funds, something of that sort. And I have some language here you might want to look at to discuss.
Could we have comment from Norm and Bob on that whole language for 1206?
I discussed this with Rick at some length and pointed out that we must also have provisions, more important, to have provisions for the unexpended proceeds of that bond issue than the interest that's derived from it, which hasn't been addressed here. And we worked up some terminology. I'm not sure this is exactly what
No,
we
it's
worked
not
up.
exactly.
I kind of liked ours a little bit.
Yeah, well,
I don't
listen.
remember what it was.
Bob is not responsible for errors in transmission here. The idea was to lump, as I understand it, the proceeds from the sale itself, the interest on those proceeds as they sit around, and profits from the investment of those proceeds, and treat them in this way. Now, what I did was take those terms and group them under the term revenues derived from the sale of the obligations, thinking that that phrase would encompass proceeds, interests, and profits. If not, we can sort of separate them out again.
Mr. Chairman, if, where it says profits here, derived from the investment, how can we get profits other than the interest on the investment?
Arbitrage, you can get it by bonds cheap and we're able to turn around and invest higher, that there's an interest profit for it, if you want to call it that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not remembering what we wrote down on the paper there, but I think that if the words, assuming that investment, whether it's from interest or anything else, you can take that idle money and I suppose go out and buy real estate or something with it too, or they're not good. But couldn't we say all revenues derived from the sale of the obligations and from the investments thereon or something to that effect be used solely for the purposes of for which obligations were issued or for payment of on interest principal?
Is that
That is
correct?
the exact wording, but I think along those lines, we just indicate we have two problems here. We have the unexpended proceeds of the sale, and we also have the revenue that may be generated. And
Does that leave us open for recall if we wish?
Mr. Chairman, I think maybe this should go back to the committee and, we do want to get these comments, but I think we have another item on the agenda to go to, which we generally shortchange, and I don't want to do that tonight.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Garnett?
not wishing to go counter to that, may I read off to Bob what I think we hit on this afternoon, see, just for my guidance, if that's close. If we say, proceeds from the sale of obligations and interest and profit derived from the proceeds. Are we including what we need to include?
from investment.
Yes, from the investment and
I
proceeds.
think that's pretty much what I think.
Okay, well, I'll try to work up something to bring it back.
All right. Is there anything further?
Mr. Chairman, there's just one thing that I wonder when we're going to have an opportunity, or has it been done? Ms. Freeman was kind enough to come, and I wonder if there are any, I think we're probably had all the finance we can handle tonight, but is it going to be appropriate, or do you think we should have a review by Mr. Freeman of that chart that we had, and to see if the wording that we have really calls for the flow as we project? Well, we're
This one?
On the floor?
The chart is on the floor.
Yeah, we're taking-
Someone hesitates to get into it, but
I have no idea, but
Tom,
not knowing what it is.
in 907, we changed that last word to be the fiscal year of the school district in 907.
well, I mean,
I don't think he was here when we did that, and this was one of the things we had a question. That
Approximately March 1st is April 1st now, it is now, right?
I think that we've gone back to the 90 days, didn't we?
Yes, and
Today,
this is
Rick, as well as that. I should have said 90 days there.
Who had the chart on the floor?
the production
The
committee.
production committee.
What's the name? Mr.
Well, yeah,
I
I can see
just
it.
want to recognize the problem.
Okay.
You're all right.
I thought it would happen while I wasn't here.
Okay, this is, I want to tell you all, this is crude.
Very, very true.
Yeah.
Since Tom's the one to see it.
Turn it on the floor so Tom can see it.
Okay, Tom.
It's very crude.
We forethought this today, so we're...
No, we're just trying to figure out what happens when, and we, of course, start with the items that are black circles are set by state law. The school district fiscal year is July 1, and the state law requirement that the school budget be at the assembly by 1 April. Okay? We don't know what your practice is, but back in January, February, we assume that you're having your budget hearings.
Yeah, we usually start about August here.
And then usually our school hearings and all our hearings with all our departments take place in November. December is when we have our first completed budget. January usually goes through the board. February we usually have our public hearings, which this last February was the whole month of February. March gives us time to redo the whole thing and present it to the Assembly on April.
Query, under our charter, what is the date again for the?
Well,
Is it 90
we've
days or-
not made the change to change it to 90 days back
Yeah, the first draft was 100.
Yeah, the first draft.
Okay, so there's a problem there. If we don't give you, right, you would not want us to require that the budget be with the Assembly by March 1.
Hopefully not. The main reason is because what we ask for, from the Assembly usually depends on what legislation does. And legislation is usually still in process. And this depends a lot. The Assembly usually waits until they hear from the legislation.
To set their mill levy.
Set their mill levy, right.
Well, if we did go 90 days, then that would make it April 1. Then they don't, have to set their, how soon do they have to set their mill levy then?
That's just mill levy for the last of May.
We haven't.
Right. But I also think that it has to be approved by...
Within 30 days of when it's
Right.
received.
Or
Yeah.
something.
All right, well, then that's April 30th.
Right.
But that's separate from setting the mill levy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the mill levy, if it's not enough to fund it, it in effect cuts that budget, is that correct?
No, we have to fund it once we give them the appropriation, unfortunately.
But there's no way we can get around that problem, is there?
The mill levy then is only
right now.
a question of mechanics.
Yeah.
So you don't see any problem with that, Tom?
No, that'd be the same as it is now, right?
Which is what?
April 1st and April 30th.
90.
I have one other question, Tom. In relation to the capital improvement budget from the school district, when is it that they are normally completing it? And would it be possible to get it in along with the capital improvement budget of the municipality before the municipality's fiscal year? How soon after September, in other words, can you folks reasonably come up with your projection for the next year on that?
Yeah, that's, I was trying to think what date that was. That's usually no problem, very good on that particular date.
All right, now, you see, we're proposing the municipality's fiscal year end in December, and that they come with the municipality's capital budget in October, wasn't it?
Oh, I see. You didn't change that, I see.
I'm asking
no,
whether that would cause a problem to have it
No.
presented along with the municipalities on the capital.
No, I don't think so. That'd be okay.
You'd have your capital budget then in October.
Right.
I had the feeling it wouldn't, but I wanted to ask you to be darn sure, because I'm not that.
Yeah, no, I don't think that'd make any difference in that.
There would be some advantage to the assembly to
Right.
know at the same time.
Do you see any wording in here that would, in the charter as first presented, that would harm the district's fiscal operations? Any wording that would raise questions, severe questions or problems?
I don't see, other than the time. There was one on the school board, I think that was decided, I think it was on the election or something, or, if that would change what,
The election, what is we mean?
The requirement to have everyone run again.
We're going to have everyone run again, but we didn't.
Well, we're going to, we decided last week for designated seats.
the question of the school board running again would be in the transition anyway, and that would come up when we consider that.
That's not a fiscal problem.
No.
Okay, well, let's get on with it.
I think we have to
No, I don't think.
We will welcome any of your comments that any of you have within the next week, 10 days. We hope to get done as soon as possible.
Mrs. Sturgill-Liskey had a good suggestion, which I think we'll try to follow, and that is when we get all these pieces put together, of course, the Charter Commission will have the opportunity to take a last look and make sure everything
Change their minds.
Yeah, integrated. But we'll circulate those to you fellows too, so that you can catch anything that's left. Like Bobby.
Save the Republic.
Mr. Chairman, for purposes of the press, would it be possible to identify the gentleman's titles? Because Bob, you've been changed. What are you?
My official title is Assistant City Manager, Administrative Services.
Of Administrative
Which
Services.
includes finance.
And you're the finance director. And I don't know, Tom, what they call you when you're
Yeah, finance
Yeah, you're
director.
fine.
Yeah, finance director. Joel, you might as well identify Joel while you're about it. He's the ombudsman. Not fake before. You've been quite quiet so far. Is there anything further from the Charter Protection? No. Thank you, gentlemen, and if you wish to stay, it's beautiful. We appreciate you being here tonight. Take your time tonight.
Leave the door ajar on your way out.
Public Information Committee?
Make it short.
Public Information Committee, Jane Angus.
You all got a memo that was back in your packet.
What, in the back of our packet?
There's a memo from Pat Carnell.
Yes.
Related to public information. I'll let him talk about the stuff on top, but essentially, during the past couple days, we've been trying to figure out how much some of the components of the public information program cost. And these are estimates of the community workshop we described.
Open, please.
The community workshop was the thing that we talked about on last Thursday, where we would bring people together to discuss with us things that are related to charge. The person who is doing that for the Devon Site Selection Committee right now is a man named Doug McConnell. And he figures that it would probably cost around $1,000, $10,000, $1,500 to get all the editing and the video equipment and the organization for the workshop. And after you get in the planning details down for the workshop, if we have to rent a place or anything like that, we would have probably one workshop costing about $20,000. On the second page, we're talking about the media kit which was provided to all the members of the press and the radio and TV stations. That would be an information package to them about us and what we've done, and some brief pictures of everybody. And primarily, it's a brief summary of where we are up to date, and we would be able to add to it as our progress changes. And we figured that would, in preparation, would cost around $240. We don't have financial information on some of the other things, particularly the graphics, because we haven't been able to contact some of the people who would be putting together, for example, a slideshow if we went out to give talks. But hopefully we'll have that for you by next week. I would like, if there are any questions about this, fine, but I'd like, so that we can try to start lining some people up and getting some dates established, I'm asking the committee to appropriate that's the right word. This amount of money for these two aspects of public information campaign, and I will then turn it over to Pat to explain some of the other things we've been doing this week, and she's got another secret, fabulous idea of how we can raise public awareness. But as soon as I can leave that to you.
Is there any commission comments?
Mr. Chairman, I have great respect for the young Doug McConnell that was mentioned by James. Doug is helping the Capital Site Selection Committee, and we have had two public hearing workshops that are perhaps in all my many years of involvement the most successful participation formats that I've seen. There have been excellent. We had one in Palmer and one in Fairbanks last night. And that's why I'm a little rummy, 'cause it's been a long day. But I really question, this is neat, it would go, but I really question its value. For $2,500, we would be hitting, and it's hard to say, but with intense media, where we drew 100 in Palmer for public hearing portion, you get a sample. We broadened it to include those that wish to participate, and we had around 50 or 60 that took part in this week's workshop. In Fairbanks, we had different people, say 65 in each session. Very good, a lot of good information. Out of those, they feel, and it's black and white, that would perhaps get 3 5-minute videotapes that can be used in the on TV. One, they feel fair to middling, 2 pretty darn good, and this is out of 3-hour sessions, and they not continuous taping, but taping of a portion of that. And I really question for the Charter Commission its value. It's a lot of money, and I think we need to know very well what the results of that would be.
We talked about this on Thursday, and the intent, as a result of the last Rowland survey, the information level of the public about what we're doing is negligible. And along the same lines as the Capital Site Selection Committee, the idea is to generate discussion. But we are particularly interested, and I talked to Doug about it, depending on the format of the workshop, of bringing that same conversation into the homes of the people, and we can do 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, 15 minute, half-hour spots for the purpose of bringing that discussion into the living room, which essentially, and it's not an advocate position. It's one of, this is the kinds of things that have gone on as a result of the efforts of the Charter Commission to this point. To my way of thinking, the usefulness of this particular tool is that it gives us access to people in their homes when we provide the forum for the discussion to take place.
Mr. Chairman, have we determined that this is going to be the kind of thing that the media will use with our children?
Yes.
That's the purpose of it.
I mean, you have determined that they will run it. You contacted the station.
No.
They'll use one.
I didn't want to go that step until I got this firm, because I didn't want to get them all excited about a concept and then have to fall back.
Well, my concern is that unless that's true, and unless we can have some idea that we're going to get fairly broad coverage from it, we're talking about a pretty expensive package that in turn may be of either one limited value or would be very costly to utilize effectively. I think it's got to have a lot of coverage and a lot of use on the media. And in other words, we need to get a return on that investment. And to me, that's kind of part and parcel. I could operate in terms of a concept on this and then have you develop some more specifics to come back and say, hey, yeah, we've got some commitments are a very good idea that it can be utilized this way.
Well, my direction from this group last week was the concept was approved, but to come back tonight with some figures.
Oh boy, and I just need to
Mr.
Well, that's what I was gonna comment, that we hashed this all over last week, and Mr. Parnell, that's his job, so I don't know why we have to rehash it again.
Okay,
Let's
but I
let him
wasn't
come
aware.
back with the recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval of the report as submitted and include in that the request that the funds be made available, subject to the report that was adopted last week.
Motion's been made, is there a second?
I have a question,
Parker.
please.
Yes.
By approving of these funds, we have not said that we approve of their going ahead and contracting for them to be spent, have we?
No, she made a contingent.
Because I was under the impression that Pat was going to see how much of this that we
She
could
said
get
that
done.
She made a contingent in her motion on
Okay.
report regarding how much
This
would
is
be.
like with scrounging all the equipment, that's not, you're not paying for use of any of that. Or that also uses the use of the studio.
Mr. Chairman, I'm rather impressed with the low figure. I'm not quite sure it's priced high enough.
It is low.
It is low. Second, it's the kind of thing that we should almost be doing at this meeting.
That's right.
We're a dollar late.
The interchange between Joe and Jane would have been ideal from over on this side.
I would like to remind the committee that
What did I miss?
Well, you were in the middle of
Compliment to your photogenicness.
no, it was a good exchange on
this is just, you know, a couple of the pieces of the whole idea that we had talked about last week. We don't have the figures on other parts, so that the cost over the long run may be greater, but this is just the beginning. So, you know, keep in mind that's not the total. I'm glad you're impressed with the low figure, but that's not the end of it.
Can you reword the statement, the motion, Sherry? That funds be made available
On the evaluation made by you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to give maximum flexibility to the committee to work with Pat. We're running short on time. I think we have a good committee, and I think we have excellent staff now, and I think that what we ought to do as a commission is to give them the flexibility to function within certain parameters, and those parameters were pretty well defined in this report and last week's report, and I would like to see them just do it.
Oh, what's your motion?
There is a motion.
My motion was to adopt this report and authorize the expenditure of these suggested funds subject to the limitations of last week's report, if any.
You've heard the motion?
Get that, what were the limitations in last week's report?
I'm very glad you asked.
Oh, it just defined what the whole concept was. Arliss was concerned about having a whole concept, and that was spelled out in last week's report that we adopted.
I promise never to mislead you ever again.
Well, I would
If
hope
there's
not.
any, is there any further discussion?
Question.
Questions called, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Agreed.
I'll listen to the tape for the motion.
We're gonna get a car noise.
There's nothing under other business.
Wait, hey, Mr. Chairman?
Speak up.
Yeah, if I may. And it didn't get into the report. I should have put it on there, but and it may require an allocation of some money for some baseball bats and some baseballs. But would you like to challenge KFQB to a baseball game on Park Strip?
I'd rather challenge them to running a radio station.
Hey, now that has merit. That's good.
Baseball baseball.
What are you proposing? Us go out and play against them in baseball?
Can you imagine Charter Commission wins?
No.
God, I'm gonna turn it.
I can imagine Charter
I can imagine that all too easily. Let the record show that I hate baseball.
Would you like to run a radio station? Jack.
I'm probably gonna do that. I hate baseball. I detest it.
Great.
What's the matter with
That was a thought. That was a thought
Basketball.
for
I joined shy of that.
I may grow to like you, Fred.
I hate baseball. Professional and otherwise.
You don't understand it.
That's right. That's right.
Also, the
It's a ball breakup.
Golf. The gospel according to golf.
Do we tend to gain a lot of publicity by having this?
Yes.
We'll get a herd.
It's not the same as if we went top of
the announcers talking about it all the time during the week coming into
The
it.
Charter Commission
All the
girls.
time, talk about the baseball game.
It was suggested that possibly it could be done about the time that the charter was completed to draw attention to the fact that it has been completed, like maybe the second or third week of July. Just kind of a kickoff for our public awareness of all things.
I make enough damn fool things in public. Me and baseball, you know,
I like the camp idea better.
Charter
And
Commission
you and your
can
back?
have fun every now and then. Instead of sitting
Well,
around in our
are
butts
you inviting
getting
us
fat.
out to beer to?
No, I think we should play baseball.
That's not fun. All right.
It'll be good for all.
I like the cab ride better. Is there a motion?
Yes.
It will Dick Fisher play this.
What is the motion?
Play baseball, can I ask you to?
Is there a second to Lisa's motion?
Sure, second.
Come on. Seconded by Lisa and Jane play baseball.
No, I think you misunderstood the motion.
I don't even know what's before.
Baseball.
Play baseball.
If we win that game, then we get to play the Libertarian Party.
And if we win that, we liberated.
Well,
It's
as
like
far as
slow
I'm
pitch.
concerned, the answer is no.
I'm with you.
Amen.
It's
And I
slow
respect
pitch.
the word
The
of the
easiest
chair.
game in the world.
There's at least four again.
Somebody call for a division in the House or anything like that.
We've divided.
Now, there's nothing further except that under comments.
What happened?
If you want to rule, appeal the ruling of the chair, have at it.
Under commissioner comments, I'm sure that Mary Crony has asked that Joel DeBoer be here, and I assume that she has some comments. Would desire to have him make a presentation.
Joe called me this morning and made a comment, and I tend to agree with the comment that he made to me over the phone, and I'd like to ask him to remake it and to the commission in general. And if you have any agreement with his comment, then I will go ahead and make a little further speech.
What's the comment?
What's your comment? I've asked to repeat my comment. I didn't know it was that profound. But what I read in the paper this morning at the Assembly last night, contrary to the request of the Charter Commission, had determined not to place two plans before the voters at the special August election, and to put on the ballot one multi-member plan. Our charter draft has been predicated on the notion that the public would select either a multi-member or a single-member district concept at a special election, and then know it large. And then,
That's right.
well, that's
No
not.
prejudice in
So then, yeah. And then that the voters, when they vote in the charter, would know what a portion of the plan would apply in the charter, subject to later charter amendment or change. And that would be an orderly way of doing it, and the voters would make the choice, and we could easily write the charter. Now, the
the problem that we face now is that if the Assembly adheres to that decision that they made yesterday, and there is only one plan on the August election, then it is much more difficult for us to reference the results of the August election in the charter. It might suggest that when we go to a final draft, that we should provide those alternatives to the people ourselves, and do the same thing that we asked the Assembly to do. It has the disadvantage of that I pointed out before, that the voter, when he votes on the charter, won't know what the districting plan is, and I think that's a little bit unfair. But then again, we haven't made that situation. We're just the I don't want to say victims of it, but we have no control over that unless we can persuade the Assembly to change its mind. The other way of doing it, as an option which one member mentioned as a possibility, was that we would still adopt the results of the special election in August, at least on a transitional basis, but provide for an early election after the charter is adopted, requiring that a choice be given to voters of the new municipality, say within a year after the new municipality is formed. The disadvantage of that, I think, is that it has no advantage. If the voters are going to face that choice in, say, August of 1976, they might as well make it at the time they vote on the charter in August of 1975. I don't know what we would accomplish by postponing it. So I guess if what I said this morning, Mary, is still what I'm saying tonight, and I hope it is, I suggested, that we explore on some basis with the Assembly what their rationale was. We may not understand all their reasoning. And if possible, suggest that they do provide the choice, making that point with a little greater urgency. If they don't, if they adhere to that, then I think we can, in a certain sense, capitalize on our willingness to be guided by a vote of the voters, at least as far as we're concerned, and provide that choice ourselves in the charter.
Mr. Chai.
Speaking contrary to Joe's point there, I think the Assembly made a wise choice, and I go back to my original stand that I don't think we ought to give and confuse the voter with a whole bunch of choices. We were elected as a charter commission to make this decision for them. I think we should present one plan and one plan only to the voter. Otherwise, you're just going to confuse this whole thing. The voter is not as apt and as understanding of districting as we are. He is looking to us to get into the intricate details of this. And I think it's foolish to go with a whole bunch of plans. End of report.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to follow up with what Joe said. I think that the Charter Commission could capitalize by showing that it intends that the new government be more responsive than the present government is. Whether or not you folks wish to make a further resolution to the Assembly, sometime tomorrow there will be an initiative and referendum on as far as the borough government is concerned in relation to apportionment. There will be a referendum on the ordinance that was passed the other night, and there will be initiatives on getting a proposition to the people that would allow them to vote on a multiple man or a single man district. The question that I have to you folks is whether or not you would like to make a further recommendation to the Assembly. If you do not wish to, if you wish to go with the whatever they come up with, then the initiative and referendum that will propose to offer the choice to the people for the charter as well. And I think it would be best to come from the charter.
Lisa asked.
We could recommend the Borough Assembly, but the Borough Assembly will say, stick it in your ear.
The thing that you'll have to make up your mind is whether you are going to tell the assembly that if they do not put the choice on the charter, that the charter could follow it, that the choice will be put in the charter. If the choice is not decided to be put in the charter tonight, then the initiative and referendum will propose to offer the initiative both for the to give the choice to the people for the charter as well as for the assembly.
Mr. Chai?
That's Mayor. You know, we buck passed this business to the assembly. It was something we should have done, but we went ahead and buck passed it. Now that they made the decision, we don't like it. So now we want to go back and make more recommendations. I mean, we're starting to look a little foolish on this thing.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I wish it to be made perfectly clear that Mrs. Frawley speaks of her initiative. I have not mentioned mine if she casts hers. Because we can blow this commission right out the wall, as far as I'm concerned, if everyone is going to go up into a snit because they don't get their own way.
Yep.
I agree with Fred that this plan that they adopted for whatever political or other reasons at the assembly is the least confusing plan that the public could have been presented with in terms of deviating the least from what is the current apportionment plan and thus least confusing the voters. Now, I suspect there are one or two members of the commission who are in favor of a single member or more, and there are some who are on the other end of the spectrum in favor of it large, and all kinds of deviations and variations thereof. And anybody who thinks they can put together a majority for their particular plan, have at it. But don't say initiative and referendum represents my point of view on something, or I'm going to be threatened with an initiative and referendum tonight, and that's going to represent the way that I'm going to be pushed into a corner on some issue.
Mr. Josephson?
Let's look, the spirit that I approached this in was that we had made a decision, and I think we were all, whether we favored single-member districts, multi-member districts at large, we were all satisfied with it. That was more or less, maybe because we couldn't have our way in the first instance. But we all agreed that it was, I thought, that we would let the voters instruct us as to their desires, and we would cheerfully abide by the result. And that the assembly could provide a way of giving us that instruction. I just feel that by offering a choice ourselves, we do the next closest thing to the policy we've already established. And I don't know how else to get there. What happens if incidentally, if the multi-member plan that the Assembly chose is rejected by the voters in August, and we have a special election 2 weeks later, and there's no plan that we refer to? We have a real terrible mechanical problem there, I think.
Ms. Parker?
Question along the same lines as what Joe said. If the plan that the Assembly puts to the voters in August is defeated, last night at the Assembly meeting it was stated that possibly if that plan was defeated, then in September, put another apportionment plan on the ballot to go to the voters and let them decide on that one. What I want to know is if the first apportionment plan that the borough puts on the ballot, if that's defeated, does the state step in and apportion us then, or do they have until October to hold more elections and let the voters decide?
The latter.
Until October.
They have until October.
They have 6 months from the time they find their malapportion to reapportion themselves properly, or
Which is October 14th.
Yeah, as far as I know.
Mr. Chairman? May I ask why our attitude has changed at the last meeting, or the meeting that directed this to the Assembly? Everybody was quite happy with the idea of going to the Assembly and that they were going to come up with something. Now, what changed all along?
I can answer that.
I can too.
The Assembly.
We didn't like the answer they gave.
No, I wasn't looking for an answer from the Assembly. I was looking for the Assembly to let the voters give an answer on some equitable basis, and I don't think they did. That's all.
Mr. Parker?
We didn't, our motion didn't say that we would accept whatever the Assembly said, Mr. Child.
Parker has the floor right now.
The people
people have said what they like, and the assembly have said what they like, and that's contradictory.
You're always going to have contradictory.
Mr. Chair,
What do you expect?
Carlos?
did you appear or participate in the...
No, I did not. I got out there late. I had a dinner appointment. I figured I'd be plenty of time, but...
Well, I just wonder at this particular point, we still, of course, have time in order to make a decision as to what goes in the charter. I'm wondering, in light of the fact that there's been a notice of reconsideration given, if we might wish to possibly make an appearance request before the assembly and restate our position and possibly give some recap of the information on the polls and some of the testimony that has been given to us, and again repeat our request. I don't like us in a way to be in the position of at this point, making a threat to the assembly, hoping that they will change. I think we have adequate opportunity to change the charter if that seems the thing to do. I don't know.
Had I spoken last night, I did wait for several hours and it got longer and longer. Mary has patience, I don't. And all I could have said and would have said would have been that we recommended this and felt that it would be less divisive than having Mary go out with a referendum and an initiative or some other means of doing it. Outside of that, we turned it over to them to do, and I think if we have some information we should give them or should give to ahead of time, we should be doing it now, because today is Tuesday. We've got Wednesday and Thursday of this week, and then they meet on Monday.
Mr. Chairman, I don't wish to be threatening to anybody, but before I was ever on the Charter Commission, I told the folks out in my area who were perturbed about not being given an opportunity to vote for single-member districts in the last go-around, thanks to Mr. Garrigous, that there was a way of doing it, and that if next time the new assembly, which I hoped was going to be more responsive to the people, did not offer them that sort of a choice, that we would go with an initiative and a referendum to try to accomplish that purpose. Now, I'm sorry that you folks feel that it is a threat. I have requested that you ask the Assembly to give the people the choice. You did. My request tonight was that you make up your minds that you were willing to still give the people their choice in the charter. If the Assembly didn't, I would like to postpone until after the Assembly has its next meeting. But the fact of the matter is, to fulfill the initiative and referendum requirement, we'll have to be on the street tomorrow, because we have to have about 4,000 signatures before next Wednesday. Therefore, I have only tonight for you folks to tell me what you're proposing to do, because the last typing of this will be done in the morning, and it will be on the street before the day is out.
Lisa?
There's nothing stopping us right now from going into an election with apportionment in the charter with the borough assemblies. We could still have a joint election.
Still have a what?
A joint election with them on apportionment, where if we gave the voters a choice and the charter was defeated.
I understand what she's...
Well, I was going to say, I don't think any of us are too concerned about the initiative. I'd encourage you to go ahead and... I'd encourage you to go ahead and start your initiative. I don't think we'll get off the ground, but go ahead and do it. I don't consider it a threat.
Jane?
Mr. Chairman,
to me, the worst thing that could happen is that the choice that the Assembly is giving people is defeated, and they put it on our election September 9th, and we have choices, and the Borough Assembly has choices. I mean, to me, that would be the worst nightmare.
Mind-boggling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in order to avoid that situation, it would seem to me that since there is notice for consideration, that we should perhaps talk to members of the Assembly and encourage them to think about putting a choice on it. If they maintain the position that they will pursue what they're doing, then I think it's time to go back and decide what we want to do. Or else we can adopt what they want, and then we can adopt what the voters say, and then in the transition section we say you must reapportion at a certain time, and you must give people choices. We could write that in.
Well, look, we have all worked closely together, and I think we all respect one another, and we know that in this issue, there are people who may differ with us, who may be right. I hope we all feel that way, and who have a reasonable point of view, even if it's not ours. So I really don't want to see this become a divisive thing. I think that's just silly. I think the suggestion of going to the Assembly Monday is a fine suggestion. I think it would be very unwise, though, to abdicate our interest in districting to the Assembly by letting them pick a plan as the plan to go to voters, and by reference accept that in our charter. And I am not prepared to do that. And I think that I'm prepared to let any plan that the Commission wants to put on go to the voters for a choice. But I think talking about responsibility, I think the most irresponsible thing would be to say, well, they've got the upper hand and we'll just abdicate in this area of districting and let them decide. So I think we could go back to the Assembly. I think the initiative, that's not my decision to make anyway. And if we don't get the right answer, then I think we've got to come back and look at where we are again.
I have one other comment in relation to the plans. As I understand it, there has to be a map shown on any apportionment plan. And inasmuch as it is quite technical to prepare one, the initiatives are going to, and the referendum are going to be speaking to the plans that have been shown here on the wall. If the Charter Commission wishes in the charter to offer the people a choice, I think it would be desirable that whatever the Charter Commission chooses as the most desirable multi-member plan, and whatever the Charter Commission proposes as the most desirable single-member plan would be the same ones that were offered for the Borough Assembly, to cut down on the amount of confusion as much as possible. Now, my intent is to make sure that the people do have a choice. I had thought the Charter Commission's intent was that they intended that the people to be given the choice. Now, obviously, Mr. Chai misunderstood the wording of the motion that we took to the Assembly, which was not that we intended to adopt whatever they chose to do, but that we requested them to give the voters a choice, that we would then adopt their choice. So it's up to you if you want to look at these and try to decide which you think are better. If you wish to go to the business of giving the people a choice in the charter, fine. If you do not want to speak to it, then I have to go on
Okay, but Mary,
the best that I can
we
go.
don't have to make that decision tonight, because as far as this
You don't
commission
have
is
to.
concerned, they could change their mind next Monday. So we don't have to face this particular issue until then. And I think you know, as Fred suggested, initiative is you just pursue that.
Oh, yeah, that by all means. I had a question of Mary, and that is, are you saying, Mary, and what you're just proposing now, that you want to stick with with all of these 5 multi-members, not add anything else, right?
I don't see how to be sure that we're legal on the staying within the 10% population variance, that we can do much juggling with these maps. I know that Dr. Selcraig wished to take the wiggle out of Plan 3 that wiggled over to the east in Section 9. And I know that Joel tried to figure out how it would be possible to even up the population in some other manner than that particular wiggle that happened by chance only to include Dr. Selcraig. But I don't think that they found any other reasonable solution to it. Sorry.
Joel? Mr. Chairman, she's just north of that line, so she's actually in Section 9.
Well, now, why are we concerned about Selcraig at this point?
Well,
We're not, I'm just...
I mean, that's not
I
the good of the
thought she was
conversation.
in there.
Chairman?
Let's get that out of here.
Someone suggested that we go to the Assembly to find out what their rationale was in the particular plan they approved. Now, they may not be able to tell you the rationale, except that they do the same thing that I do, to see where I am, to see what my possibilities of being involved in the civic process. And it does not, it defies definition in terms of the rationale why they did such a thing. There are a number of people in this community, regardless of what people say, who still like the at-large system. And I happen to live in the city that likes the at-large system. I have yet to see the plan because these were drawn up at a time when we did not get our oar in terms of having something at large that satisfies my particular situation for government. Now, I don't think going back to the Assembly next Monday and asking them why they decided on this plan is going to solve the problem any more than this one does.
I fully agree with Jim. I think as a commission, we better do our own work, and let's not